Welcome back to the Orange Stars podcast. I have Bart Combs in the house. Bart, how are you?
Good to see you.
Yeah, it's really great to have you. A little context for people that watch the show. First off, we're in Las Vegas, Nevada. This is SHOT Show 2024.
Right.
How many SHOT shows have you been to?
Well, we exhibited at a 10. That was for 10 years, and then I've attended at least a handful more. So I'll say I'm in 15, 16 of these. So,
so you're a vet in more than one way. But this is only my second go around, and this experience this year has been even better than my first. I had a very positive experience, and we have a mutual friend, Mike Olivella, who put us together. And Mike's a guy I trust implicitly, and he's been very, very good to me for whatever the reasons are that are beyond my comprehension.
He's a good dude.
He's a good dude.
Yep.
And he said, you know what, man? Because I got a very interesting character that you might want to talk to. I think he's doing some cool stuff. And he gave me a little bit of an insight. I'm like, well, Mike, if you say I got to talk to this guy, let's talk to him. Because he knows I love having really good, conversations with people that are doing interesting things that are also relevant to the listeners or the audience on the show, but I think just in people in general. And, at risk of rambling here, my goal is to just provide, value in the conversation that we have today. So I had a bit of a conversation. It wasn't a long one, but it was long enough to get a sense of what we're getting into today. And I'm excited.
Well, good. I am too.
Thank you for taking the time out to be here and have the discussion with me. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's my pleasure.
I'm stoked to get into it. So I'll stop talking here. Look, there's a lot in this conversation, and I'm going to do my best to kind of navigate it. There's a few points that I really want to get to today that I'm really interested in kind of digging in with you on. But as always, I like to give everybody an understanding of who they're listening to and why would Scott have this guy on his show. So You get to start and finish wherever you want. You just got to be patient with me because I might hit the timeout signal to get a little bit more information or context on what it is that you're talking about, or maybe understand a little bit better. So, shoot, ready, go.
Well, you gave my name, so I guess my journey started with my mentors in high school. My father sort of left, my immediate circle in that time frame. Not an uncommon thing for some time. Single parent mom is a teacher, but and looking for the male role models, and as you're coming with high school age, and I got a doozy, and this was a 4-tour Vietnam Green Beret lieutenant colonel who was in the junior ROTC department of a high school that I was at. And he actually had been, in the service, in and out of the service, but since he was 17 years old in World War II as a scout.
Wow.
So, when he would tell stories, you'd have to wait to, are we talking about World War II, Korea? I'm waiting for an adversary so I can bracket
understand this. Yeah.
Right. And,
wow.
But he'll become important later as far as how I've really came into what I did. But he went to school at UVA. This is back in the day when a lot of schools in Virginia were still all male, all female back in, even up when I was coming out in the 80s. And so he loved VMI. And so I went to Virginia Military Institute. And it's at the time still an all-male, very Spartan military college, and a lot of stress inoculation and all that. But I knew I needed that. And I wanted that because, I wanted to do the kind of things that he had done and in his circle. Both in his Army Special Operations and things like that. So got through VMI, went to airborne school, Ranger school in the summers as a cadet. We could still do it back in those days. Came into the infantry, got my commission, went on to the 509th Pathfinder unit. So got an opportunity out of the gate to get something less than norm, I guess, but much more than, in fact, because Pathfinder units operate very decentralized. So I got to go to more schools, of course, Pathfinder School, Jump Master School, and for the things, and we're operating, when I got there, this is mid-'80s, that unit still had people in there from Vietnam era. Rangers that were, and so, again, the amount of experience I'm getting quickly You don't just, and now they have high school to flight school. They have so SF has a pipeline for sort of people from right off the bat. But that wasn't normally you grew into those things, right?
Hold on. So let me time you out. This was going to be my first time out.
Yep.
Can you educate me on the Pathfinder Roll? What it is, what it maybe was then, what it is now? Can help me out?
Unfortunately, it's has been since disbanded as a unit thing within the Army. The Pathfinder School, like there's Ranger, regiment, Ranger Battalion, Ranger Regiment, and of course you go to Ranger School to go to that, but you can also go to Ranger School and go throughout the combat arms and mostly infantry as well. Pathfinders, there were much fewer Pathfinder units. There's some very small, but what they do is they operate with aviation generally, and their job is to go in. Their motto is first in, last out. They're one of the ones that are going to go in. They're going to jump in or insert some way ahead of major forces and set up landing zones, drop zones, all of this. So you're operating sort of small units, onesie, twosie, or very decentralized. You might be, doing multiple operations at the same time.
Okay.
So with that, you are not with a full platoon or even a squad or anything. You're you have holistic units. I was a platoon leader, and yet I've got people all over the place, and I may be just one with an RTO. So it just got you in a frame, sort of a frame of mind that, okay, we're kind of out here on our own, is however small that is. And so you have to be a lot more self-sufficient and all of that. So that already started that. It also started my operations with a lot of aviation. I was still an infantry officer, but I worked with aviation. Well, as part of my schools and all that I got to go to, I got a chance to go to the SERE, which is Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape, something that schools that have habitually been done for aviation, all services have that type of SERE school, and also special operations for both reasons, whether you eject out over, enemy territory or you are operating deep, as special operations, special mission might, you've got to be able to, do the best you can to maybe evade or to get out of a situation when things go sideways because there's just not a lot of infrastructure around you. And also you're more apt because you're out there at risk. You're more apt to possibly be rolled up, and so then you're captured and that whole thing. So but I got to go to a different, the SERE school in the Army at the time, again, mid-'80s, was the SERE instructor qualification course run, and people who are from that community know of Nick Rowe. He wrote the book 5 Years to Freedom. And the connection to my mentor from high school was that Lieutenant Colonel was Nick Rowe's B detachment commander. And so,
wow. Okay.
And so here I've got this connection. I knew of this story. I knew of him when I was in high school. I'd read the book.
Okay.
And so now I've got a chance to go to a school that he had been brought back onto active duty to basically gen this up because the Special Forces pipeline was sort of needing that again, a resurgence, right, post-Vietnam. So anyway, I got a chance to go through. It was one of the best schools I had been to at that point. And
Why?
I've been through all I think because, that's good. One, I'm an only child. I've loved the outdoors. And the only child thing, I know for some who didn't have that would say, well, that means you're spoiled. Could be. But it also means you get used to being comfortable with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been, and I think when I did outdoors things, I always took it on myself to be, self-sufficient or capable. Yep. Right. I mean, I just didn't assume. And back in, when I grew up like 70s as a kid, because I graduated high school in 80, I'm just saying it was still, we would come out to Colorado. It's still pretty, the outback is the outback,
right? It's pretty wide open.
And I live in Colorado now because I got the bug back when I used to come out, in the summers. So as a kid. And but anyway, I think really in that whole course, and most people who've been to it, they don't like being there. Like VMI, I said, it's not a place you like to be from, you don't like to be at. and I think a lot of people learn a lot about themselves through whichever phase of SERE that they can remember. And most of them focus on one because there's SERE-C, the high level. But anyway, and whether it's stuff that they learned in the field, actual field craft skills that they may have never done before because they didn't have access to Boy Scouts or Outward Bound or those kind of things, or it may be things that they got in other portions of
To
the
their
course
life. Yeah.
that puts them,
Yeah.
In scenarios where they have to, they have to handle themselves with others and with adversarial things. Just unarmed, about as bare as you can be. And I think for a lot of people that they learn a lot about themselves, bottom line. And I think I did too. But I came out of there energized because I loved it.
Right.
And it was in those days, the attrition rate was pretty high.
Well, maybe for folks that don't understand what this is, or maybe think they have an idea, can you maybe fill in the blanks? Like just sort of talk about what the experience is like for a participant in something like that, or at least for you, based on your experience.
As a general rule, it's those 4 letters. And each one, the first 2 have to do with. The first letter is survival, which is just pretty obvious. Is just what most people would think of fieldcraft, bushcraft, those kind of things. Mm-hmm. But the reality is, no matter what your phase or paradigm is, in other words, I'm on the run, or I'm isolated, I ejected, I've landed, or I'm in a helicopter, I've had to auto rotate, and I'm out on the ground. I've lost my primary mission and my means of transportation, so I'm on the ground now. Now I have to evade and at least get away from bad guy areas and into good people areas, or recover myself, get all the way back to some, where there's people who can either recover me or I self-recover. Well, all that evasion, you're still surviving no matter what. That's always there, right? We live, and that's the one thing about today and these things that I think are important, and we've unfortunately lost a lot of them through sort of the suppression of things like Boy Scouts, Outward Bound, mm-hmm. National Outdoor Leadership Schools, those kind of things. Unless you're out west, or most people are more urbanized, and we sit in 70 degrees, dry.
We don't do hard things.
Yeah, so. and instant gratification. Right. And so once you know how to do it, and to me, it's once you learn how to tie your shoes, you know how to do it. You don't think about it. Yeah. And much of this stuff can be. Become it's just something and you can bring back to bear when you need to. Mm-hmm. You don't have to, if you want to run with it, but you don't have to make it a life study. Now, I have, but for different reasons of teaching and both in the military and then starting a company that just focuses on this. But I think the primary thing is having that baseline. It's, I don't want to get too much into the psychology of it, but if people have heard of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, mm-hmm. right? And that bottom rung, the bottom rung is just basically survival. It just keeping those metabolic processes going.
Yep.
And good things that are
food, heat, shelter.
Yeah, right? But good thing that a lot of our stuff, we don't have to think about breathing. We can focus on that. But then now we have to think about, how am I going to maintain 98.6? How am I going to, if it's not automatic to you, or that you've had training, some sort of, or you lived in that way.
Some exposure to it, yeah.
Because, we call it survival, but let's face it. Our forefathers, foremothers that grew up, they just called it life.
Yeah.
They say the Inuit don't know anything about Arctic survival. They just live there.
They just do that.
Yeah, that's right. And that's true. And anyway, I just liked that. And the evasion part of the rest of that SERE school is just the evasion, again, is just getting back. The next 2 letters are more having to do with, it is the classic POW experience, or at least that whether it's in a wartime and in POW, or whether it's somebody being kidnapped or somebody being, mm-hmm. Taken like in a governmental side kind of a situation, which, you can watch the news. It's happened. We still have people.
Every day, yeah.
Right. And whoever the actors are that are, but you are being held against your will. Mm-hmm. And so you have to deal with that in however that manifests. Now that's about as far as, we can go into it, a bit just obvious, You've seen, there's plenty of movies
just
historically.
Right.
And so of course Hollywood does, there's some aggrandizement on that kind of stuff. But from the conflicts, and through the years, the great thing about after I became an instructor and getting access and getting to interview so many, starting back in the mid 80s of these people, I can hardly read fiction anymore because I love reading historical stuff and nonfiction, but it reads like fiction because these people have done, they've actually lived it. You're reading stuff that reads like fiction, and yet this isn't Rambo or, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Commando or some of these. This is This is people who have done it, have survived, and then sometimes movies are made out of them. For the old school people in the crowd, they would remember things like The Great Escape, but there are actual people behind some of the characters that maybe Steve McQueen played, or in the case of, more recently was Unbroken with Louis Zamperini.
Right.
And anyway, I've gotten to meet so many of these kind of people. And of course, Nick Rowe himself, they never made a movie about it, but his book, 5 Years to Freedom, is a classic amongst...
That one was harrowing. We're talking, for people that don't like, bamboo cage.
Yeah,
stuff.
It's not... He was not up in the Hanoi Hilton. He was held down in Fourth Court, basically down in the jungles with people who were at a subsistence level themselves. And so back to the survival, even when you're captive, you think, well, my captor's going to keep all my stuff, And this is that whole counterparty risk, which we'll talk about later, to say, well, what about in a situation where your captors are at a subsistence and survival level themselves?
Yeah.
If you don't do it for yourself, well, you're just going to expire because they're living that way. And that's something that Nick Rowe certainly got very good at, even while a captive, that he was going out and doing things that normally you would think would be done when you're maybe surviving and evading. No, he was surviving because surviving. S is first, and it happens that you've got to do it the whole time. And if the last E, which we call escape, which it's a part of the we have a code of conduct in the military, for active duty military, and one of the things is I will make every effort to escape and aid others to escape. And so that's one of those things that's out there, and that's something that it's a moral code. It's not a UCMJ thing, but that's something that that the military is taught. And
it happens.
Yeah. And one of the things, though, for a long time is that, even Nick Rowe said, they would tell us this, but they never told us how. It's like, so that was one of the things. It's like, okay, there's doctrine and there's what's your good guidance, but then sometimes you got to have the actual kinesiology or the actual knowledge of how to do it. And I think sometimes, some training was lacking, I guess. But anyway, I mean, he managed to escape eventually. One of the few during the Vietnam era was much more rare.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it was a couple of times.
Exactly. That was actually his third. And when and goes back to something I've talked about earlier, just to say that when people do that, a lot of times, and I don't want to jump too far ahead, but in any of that, like let's just say escape, there's a common thing to say, well, there's such a small percentage of people who actually successfully escape. And depending on your conflict of, the major theater wars throughout history.
Yeah.
But even in some areas where they're so remote and so far away, and in the case of those in the Hanoi Hilton, very, very difficult. There were escape attempts, but I'm just saying they're in the middle of a city,
right?
They don't look anything like, they stand out
like
right.
Yeah.
And so all of these reasons but people still tried, but there were some other successful escapes. But the bottom line in most cases, it was what's the most rare is for somebody to just make one attempt and they succeed right out of the gate. It's in most cases, such as Jerry Sage, who is the Cooler King, and pretty much I know Steve McQueen's character was an amalgam of different ones, but it was an American, and one of the few Americans in Stalag Luft 3, and he was the one who was kept trying and getting caught,
Right.
And so there's one of many metaphors that I draw from the SERE world and what I have done through, for the last 4 decades, and entrepreneurship, or just fulfillment in any way. You don't have to start a business, but just, there's 3 levels to all this. And so I said that Maslow hierarchy of needs, that survival one, and then you go, acceptance and all these other things, or safety and security, and then it's more of acceptance. And we kind of stay there. We come in, because we have these bottom ones done for us, we come into this level where most people are into looking for acceptance, peer, that's where we are. And because in a developed nation, we're not at that worrying about these things. Now, and then of course, as we work our way up, hopefully that top rung is fulfillment, is this, or action, I call it, actuation, or, that you, but you get actualized or whatever, but that's like fulfillment, that you achieved a goal, whatever your passion is, But that higher level requires that middle level, which I would call freedom, and it's said in the Stoic things and all kinds of other things that happiness, is, be happy, but happiness requires freedom. Okay. But what does
What does
freedom
that
require?
mean?
What
Yeah.
does freedom require? And to me, it requires that bottom one. So I think there's three. There's fortitude, there's freedom, and then there's fulfillment.
I love that.
And so what I would call that SERE stuff and all of this and what we do outside of that, because a lot of what we're doing now, it has to do with taking things from this context that was my 20-year military career, and I did that. I taught. It was never my primary job. It was like a secondary thing that I just did. That was the Nick Rowe's vision at the time.
Right.
He was unfortunately assassinated later in 1989 while in the Philippines. Survived all the other stuff prior and only to be taken early like that. But his legacy, of course, is set in stone greatly up at Fort Bragg and the Special Warfare Center, and with that course. And so, but he empowered us to go out here and to teach and do what we could in our units while we were there. I mean, we're not working in a fixed schoolhouse.
Gotcha.
There was only the one at McCall at the time.
Okay.
And so we would go out, and now we're having to do it ad hoc, but we would do it wherever you are. And I was infantry, and then I got a chance from teaching SERE, ironically, to go to flight school. I took it, so I became an aviator, and then I did. Flew scout and attack aircraft, but I started teaching in aviation, the aviation unit I was in.
Teaching the SERE.
Right. Yeah, we'd get
skills.
a chance, just sort of hip pocket kind of stuff, or we'd be out in the field, and it was not. I didn't like stop and have a school. I mean, I was a company commander. I'm doing my other jobs, but when we had an opportunity, kind of throw it out there. I in the leadership or S3, whatever, say, hey, that's good. We haven't had that, and there was no school for Army aviation. At that time, hadn't been since it was sort of some ad hoc ones in Vietnam era. But anyway, so through the 80s, and this was my time up through the early 90s, there was no SERE for aviation and Army. The other Navy, Air Force, they had theirs. But yeah, SERE really benefited me and allowed me to go to flight school. That would not have been normally an opportunity, and I took that. But really, I was coming back that I wanted to do the soft stuff. I really, was, my mentors were in that. They were
right. Go back
and
to
so
the
and
stuff.
When I was back in the old days, 80s, but even 70s, I just remember seeing people. Aviation wasn't a branch earlier on, so you were combat arms. You could be armor, infantry, armor, and or artillery, whatever, and you do your aviation tour and then go back. It was kind of something you did every other sort of assignment. But then they made aviation a branch. So now it's kind of, once I was in it, that's what I was in. But there were other opportunities, and about the 8-year mark, had some, people go up. I got a chance to try out, for an organization. And so I did the sort of the tryouts and I made it. And so, because I was kind of I'd just done all this fun stuff for, the first half, again, about eight and a half years in the military. I'd had my company command, and now I'm like, okay, great. Now's the time you kind of go into what we call your secondaries. You kind of go, you get sent to the Pentagon, or you go to recruiting command, or you go to
niche-y.
And for, I mean, there's nothing wrong with any of those things, or ROTC duty, which, but you get something, or what they call your secondary. But if you go in some of these other paths, you might be able to stay operational longer. Those who go in the service generally, especially in the combat arms, really want to be, they want to go do things. They want to, they're action oriented. They want to be on the deal, as we used to say.
They want to be, they want to do the thing.
Right. And so anyway, I went. There were some delays, and actually for a bit. So by the time because Desert Storm hit, I was out in the Pacific Theater, so we didn't go. We were slated to be reinforcements because I was in an attack unit. We had Cobras, though, Vietnam era Cobras. So, but it didn't. 100-hour war doesn't beget
really
a lot of yeah. But anyway, eventually, after a little bit of delay, got to go. I made it, and I moved out of where I was and came into Special Mission Unit and spent the next 6 years just having an absolute blast,
doing the things
that I'd always wanted to do, and also with a lot of other people that are just the best. They are the best. The best. I felt honored to be able to, to work with them, and it was, it was for me very fulfilling. At that time, that to achieve that. And even in there, I got to, there'd be times where I'd be still doing hip pocket stuff, whether I'm doing training or whether I'd look at maybe looking at kitting stuff, because from a practitioner saying, okay, can this be updated? Can be optimized? Can we get more efficient, reduce the cube, reduce the weight? Because, as anybody who's light infantry or whatever back in the day, and everybody rides and flies now, but, in my day, everything you had was on this big back wart you had. You had 100 pounds of lightweight equipment, as they call it, So that's why guys were more, they were kind of bony, but you could ruck forever. And training out in Colorado at the time, that's what makes you really good at that, and I had done a lot of that, just backpacking and all that. So, but anyway, so there's an optimization for if I'm making kits for a by exception, they can't be too big. And anyway, we got better but the big part of that, what makes it better is not just because here's what SHOT Show, it's very consumerist. It's just, there's a million things out here to look at. It's more than you can see.
It's so redundant.
Yeah. There's too much to even see in 3 or 4 days. But the point being, if you have the skill sets, through knowledge and skills, you can, that's where you're going to reduce. It's not, you're not going to have 100 things that do 100 different things. How about you have 5 things or 8 things, and through training and through orthogonal thinking and through adaptability, that I can take these things if I selected them right, and I can apply them across many different things, right, across all different domains of use it for signaling. I can use it maybe to assist me with nav, or maybe firecraft or medical or whatever. Okay. And so that's what we've done, on our product side, just saying, but I did all of what I've done in my company started, of course, with doing it in the military, certainly. So 20 years, I finished out my career on the airborne special operations side. So, I got to do what I would say is the fun and exciting stuff, because we all, in the end, as you work your way up, and I don't care whether you're a non-commissioned officer or a warrant officer or a commissioned officer, the different, is that you're going to have to do those jobs where it's like, man, really, because it's the stuff that you have to do. Just like right now, if you own a business, you may have started a business because you like doing a task, right? If you're a chef, even, you like cooking or creating new dishes, and yet
that's not running a restaurant.
That's right, exactly. You've got to run payroll. You've got to do all this other stuff, and then. But either you hire people to do that, or when you're starting out, you're doing it. Yep. And it pulls you away. And this is no different in the military. I didn't have to do that as much, I felt, because I got to do the things that, just the action things. And all the way up till, I pretty much retired. And if I wasn't, getting to do the action things, well, at least I was working on things that would help improve the people that are also going downrange next, and giving them better equipment, better, that kind of stuff. And so, and whether that was in this, again, the SERE realm, or whether that was in the primary job, shoot, move, communicate kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so when I retired, I was 84 to 04, was pretty much my window of my total military career. I got out, and it was, could have stayed in longer, and I would just, but you also have, life gets in the way, and I'm saying life is families and things, and I wasn't in the way, but I'm just saying I had different responsibilities now. I was single for a good portion of my military time, and if you're going to do that kind of work, probably suggested, because it's tough. Yeah. It's tough to manage. It's really is just the demands of that. But and God bless the families that can that, because they didn't necessarily sign up for that, but they have to, the deployments and all that thing. But when you have an issue, with and in the family between my wife, I had a young son, and it's just, there were some issues that was kind of concerning of whether or not, if something happened to me, if I were to stay in, because I got, you get offers after you've come in that community to go continue to do this stuff as for
some level
contracting
for
companies, go back into, and do Basically,
there's agencies and things like that,
but
right?
but the reality is you don't always have the same thing. The bad thing about that for some of these guys is that if it happens really fast, you got to remember you don't have the same
support
coverage,
system,
right? It's just like if you work in government and have other types of credentials. Let's say official passports and things like that. It gets you other support. If you're a blue passport holding, you're just a regular schmo, you just have to take that into account, and it's true now even for government people.
Yeah, what we're talking about is the vulnerabilities that exist there,
right,
and the decrease in capability because of the things that have been pulled away from you that you may not even realize yet.
Right.
And you don't want to be finding that out.
Exactly.
Right? When the shit hits the fan.
Right.
Yeah.
And I say that because we've had a foot in both. We've served certainly a lot of military active duty and still do, and on the soft and smooth side, and also interagency. That was coming into play around the as post 9/11, of course, and in the early 2000s of a lot of the, whether it's DOJ and others were coming into needing personnel recovery. The Army finally had its doctrine in personnel recovery. It was actually dated in 2005. I was already out a year. I'd been doing this for 20 years, and yet a lot of this stuff had never been truly codified,
Wow.
And so, but it's fine that it was finally coming out, but it's one thing to write it down. It's something else to have it actually have infrastructure. And that's the one thing
it's like a business.
Right. And I think I mentioned too, that's the one thing, my operational periods and my travels through different, theaters around the world is what I found out is, we may have a lot of good doctrine, and yet sometimes it's not something behind it. So the analogy would be, if I see a fire alarm on the wall, well, we would all assume in a developed nation that's connected, it's connected to an infrastructure that's going to respond.
What does that mean? But what does that really mean?
Right. And now you go travel, because we deal, obviously, all our things are about deployments. But now if you're out of the military, but you're traveling around the world, you could be in just a developing nation. You could be in a frontier nation. Their infrastructure certainly is not maybe the first world. But even in the first world, you can have incidents where, and we've seen it. Katrina, I had mentioned, Katrina was a big, wake-up call. And that when you have something that's widespread, now this is Mother Nature, this isn't conflict or man-made, but you have, earthquake, a hurricane, whatever, it destabilizes normal first responder infrastructure.
It's interesting you just brought that up. I was just having that conversation with a first responder this morning, and we were just comparing and contrasting cities. I live in the Silicon Valley.
Yep.
Right. And I believe it's better than 50% of the first responders that work in the city don't live in the city. Mm-hmm. They live as much as 2 hours away, and it increases as from police to fire, fire being more in terms of distance sometimes, because they work like a 3-day shift and then they have 4 days off or whatever. So it's kind of worth the time trade, and they get time home with the family or whatever else, or to do another job if that's what they're doing. But what came up for me, the reason, the context for me bringing this up is people listening to this going, we're talking about like a hurricane, a earthquake, something like that, in terms of what could upset where the infrastructure could be exposed.
Right.
It's already been exposed, and it's been exposed in this way, in that because they can't afford to live in the cities that they work in.
Sure.
Right. And they have to, and the quality of life there, based in, they don't want to raise their families there. They know that. Right. They also don't want to, walk outside their high-rise apartment building and be stepping over the person they just put in jail 3 days before. And, all of the things has made it so, like, as an example, if we have 50% of our firefighters that are off duty, and they live outside the city by 2 hours, and we have a natural disaster, we have a major, major problem. Right. We are very exposed. And so going back to it's a cliched term, but nobody's coming.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a Katrina for this.
No, it does not.
It could just be any kind of civil unrest, any kind of natural disaster, any of those things. We're already exposed. And so I'm just putting that out there as context. These are real things for people that live in these environments.
It's a great point. And to we call that it in the in the SERE and personnel recovery, which is the other side of it. So SERE is obviously what the individual's doing, the isolated person, what they're doing for themselves, and the personnel recovery is sort of that umbrella term for what is the rest of the sum of all efforts out here of what is of from whether it's diplomatic, whether it's actual rescue forces and people who are first responders, and whether it's just civil, could it be private, kind of things. But whatever it is that could help assist, it doesn't mean you're actually doing it and it's always a helicopter recovery. It could be any number of things. Somebody just runs out there in a truck or, to find you. But however it is to that personal recovery umbrella, but we call that the tyranny of time and distance, is that you have to have a good measure of what, your level of risk tolerance should be predicated on not only your skill sets and the environment and all of that, but also what is, if any, the response, how long, and when they get here, what can they do?
What can they actually get done?
Yeah, what can they do? And all of that, and just, to add to that, or if you were to say, if your situation is, me traveling alone, I feel much more comfortable for a minute, just through the years of doing different stuff and the levels of training than when I had a younger family, a young son, and I felt much more, let's say, exposed at times that my risk tolerance is going way down. So I'm going to, and so that's, it seems like common sense, but it's sometimes people don't take that into account, and I do believe there's a tendency across, just if I were to say a cross-section of normal society, to assume that normal institutions and organizations that are out there, and because we did in the military, we were taught that, hey, if you do this and you do this, you send up this, this red star cluster, right?
Signal,
you throw the smoke,
and the cavalry comes.
You say a code word on a radio, you do whatever, that boom. It's just there, and there are times when that does happen, just like at home, 911. And of course, people say, there's never a response when you need it. Well, yeah, because usually you're calling in the midst of it and you want it immediately. And
that's not realistic.
2 minutes, which is crazy fast. 2 minutes would seem like an eternity, depending on what's going on. But so to bring all that back is to say, well, then you need to take that on and have a realistic and pragmatic acceptance of and accountability of where you are in this, if you've chosen to travel here to partake in some activity, whether it's your profession, you're doing it for recreation, whatever, you have to kind of take that on. And so the next extension of that, though, is in the rest of life, is that, okay, we're not talking about first responders and all that. What are we talking about? What's the capacity where I'm at of the financial system? What's the capacity and/or capabilities of the medical infrastructure where I'm at?
Well, we saw that get stretched pretty bad a couple of years ago, right?
And so exactly, and we've seen for recently, our not too distant past.
Right.
Most Americans have seen or are feeling that right now.
How close?
Right.
Yeah. How
and
close you actually are.
We're seeing that, and people who get older than me is that have lived, most of the people who lived through, let's say, the Depression and other kinds of things when, we haven't really had any kind of warfare, on our soil. So we don't know what that's like. Other people who are Europeans and others certainly have seen that or have, first, at least one generation removed, that they know that, they've experienced that. And so all I'd say is, we'll just say this: in times of increasing uncertainty, it's good to have. You should have increasing optionality. And going back to the whole SERE thing, it's all about contingency. It's not about obsessing about this. That's the one thing about the SERE.
Doom and gloom, right?
It is not. It's not hunker in your bunker, doom and gloom, obsessing about this stuff. And it's not all going to be fixed by kit. What I call the castle doctrine. And nothing against people who prepare. That's all great. All I've been talking about is preparing. It's in a way preparing yourself with skill sets and awareness and also just a mindset of And whether you want to, because I got it, the 30. I'll give him that. I never met him, but 30 seconds out does that. You're on your own, or expect a self rescue. No one is coming. That same kind of. It's great. It's a. It sounds like it's pessimistic, but it's really empowering in a way that, okay, well, if that's your baseline, then it's better to be pleasantly surprised that somebody showed up faster than you thought or at all, than to assume the opposite, that you're betting on this and that's all you've got. You don't have any other, no other tricks in the bag to be able to bring to bear here to extend even your ability to survive long enough to be recovered. And so for that time and distance thing. So anyway, the part of that, I guess, right now is that people are feeling a little bit where our phones are ringing more, and it's just regular people. We're not talking, we still serve our normal clients, but I've got a lot of people who are calling and they are just concerned, and they're asking us about, we do classes and things like that. So, but jumping ahead, but the SERE, just to say that the SERE stuff really does apply, and the
principles
exactly right. to regular anybody. And what we realized, and to keep the story going of just saying, okay, when I got out, I did about a year of doing some things. I was a contractor for about a year for another company, but it was stayed in my field. I did, was in this personal recovery kind of stuff, and I went right back to the community that I knew in one of the commands that was. And I helped kind of build the infrastructure, and again, codify it, if you will, and that is to okay, it's good to have, tactics, techniques, procedures, and SOPs, or this, standard kind of procedures. But if they're not really written down, if this is just scribbled on a napkin, or we're just going to wing it, you can train to that standard.
Or the pass down, like this guy tells the next guy.
Right. It's some sort of voodoo.
Telephone game, some osmosis.
Or that you're going to do it all by just, Bronet. You're going to get on and do that. I mean, and you can do that kind of stuff when you have it set up. And there's always the winging it. And you can train people to that sort of standard. But it probably shouldn't be your first swing at bat. It's like I was saying on the POWs, they escape. It wasn't always on their first one, maybe the third, maybe the 12th. And just like small businesses, they start and people say, well, 99% fail or whatever, the 90+% fail in the first 5 years. Okay, well, do you think the people who might try to start a business and if it didn't work, they're just like throw their hands up and forget it? I mean, I don't, most are going to probably try again or learn, pick up, dust themselves off,
every successful entrepreneur that I know has failed 10 times.
Exactly.
Before they
7 times down, 8 times up.
There you go. Exactly.
So it's so all of that still works, and just from a way of thinking and a philosophy, but going back to, if you're going to do operations and you have people, whether you're a business that has people out there that you send, I would say, okay, you have a duty of care. That's kind of something that we have in the legal world in the litigious world, the insurance world, called duty of care, but also just from a moral sort of, reality that you should be doing that, right? And the same for, our government. We send young men and women downrange, and we should give them the skills and tools, knowledge, skills, and tools to be able to handle things, because you can't assume, especially in warfare of any kind, low intensity, major theater war, you can't, be sure that things aren't going to go sideways. That's the nature of conflict. And so doing everything you can to prepare them for when you can't control, when those leaders aren't in a position to control, or when they are. And again, I grew up in a more decentralized way, and so it's more common in that world. But I would say it's not, and so more conventional general purpose forces, like large units of brigade combat, these brigades and all. But at some point, they're going to be decentralized, spread out, maybe through enemy action, that split people up, but
They
the
have to be
bottom line is
self-reliant.
they do. And the more they can do that, and yet they've got a lot on their plate. I get it. They have so much on their plate to do their primary job that the by exception contingency stuff falls off.
Yep.
And it's just like we do at home. We don't think about, but, to do a couple things ahead of time, like putting a fire extinguisher underneath your sink in the kitchen or something, not because you're paranoid about fires, but just and there's a fire department, but how long does it take them? Can I knock this down so it doesn't engulf the whole side of the kitchen before they get there?
And by the way, nobody ever gave anybody a hard time about putting a fire or about thinking about putting a fire extinguisher under their kitchen sink after their kitchen caught on fire and they put it out with the fire extinguisher that they put under their sink.
Right.
However, they have no problem giving somebody a hard time about, dude, what are you worried about? Like, you don't need to do that. Like, come on, stop being all doom and gloom.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. And again, you can take anything to a fault. And I was talking about the castle. When we buy gear and kit, and if we have everything in our home, one thing I know about just Murphy and how Murphy's Law and how that is that they will make sure that just when you finish totally prepping out your basement or your
feeling great.
Exactly. You got all this food, ammo for those that are doing that, whatever it is that are your preps, and that you're going to have it all in this nice one place, unless it's ready to pick. We had in Colorado Springs, we had 2 different years, summers, where we had wildfires come down. We had a Waldo Canyon fire that came through. Local people there, know how. We're not really sure. It's kind of weird how that started. But there've been a lot of fires, in a lot of places, not only California, in Australia, in Greece, and all these things. And in some cases, it's man-made, not necessarily lightning strikes, which we normally have in Colorado. We have lightning strikes, in California, high country and dry. But
some of those caused some major devastation. But the ones that caused the most death were caused by the fires were started by humans in California. Most of them.
It might be the case for Colorado because we've had 2. We had the also Black Forest fire, which is North Colorado, and clear blue day. I mean, we have our lightning storms in the summer, and if we have, but we also have, that's our monsoon season, so we usually have rain every day. But it was clear blue day. It was no lightning. And anyway, both those fires between, and the Waldo Canyon fire, man, that winds, we have these katabatic winds come down Pikes Peak, and it was like a fire tsunami. People were running out of their homes within, minutes. Just 5, and just gathering whatever, of just heirlooms or anything they're most the things that are most precious, certainly people, pets, and then if there was anything that was whether it's grandma's picture or whatever, or the one little safe or something that they had that was just of some worth, whether intrinsic to them or actual worth, but they didn't get much. And they got in their cars and they blasted off, and it raised. It looked like Dresden. It took these homes to the foundation, and very close to where I live too. But we were spared just the way the winds went. But I'll say that with that, we were talking about the response. Now we had, our people. Nothing else had happened prior, so we had the full response of, let's say, the Front Range fire side, but they were overwhelmed. They were overwhelmed too, and they were just backing up and just trying to make lanes for people to get through and to evacuate. But then, and what did people do? Well, they went to we had sort of the Red Cross and other things were setting up sort of stations for people to like refugees to come to these high schools that were a little farther back and stay in the gymnasium. They had cots out. They were on the ball. But then one of the strangest, it's not strange now, it's common, that I would say go back to is like just when you think you've been hit enough, you lost your home, let's just say, is that some of these people that went to these, whether it was hotels or the high schools, that within the first night, and this happens around the world, and it's so I'm giving an example in the U.S. to say, hey, this isn't only happens if it happens, it's a human nature thing. Opportunists.
Right. Every time.
When things get destabilized, the opportunists show up. And they showed up that night. And people, I guess the people, we get so much going on, you don't immediately think, hey, we got to also watch the parking lots. And the cars got broken into, a lot of them, and they took I mean, the opportunists
heirlooms.
came and took things from these people. It was the last thing they had, with them. And it's like, man, just to hit. And the thing is, though, this has happened in plenty of other places. They had the earthquake in Nepal. A lot of human trafficking went through the roof right after. And so it goes back to, that being, if you're going to go out and do adventure travel and do things, travel around, and as whether you're in retirement or you just get to do it as part of your job, you really need to take into account the, how quick the sort of snowball effect of this small thing hits another small thing, but it's a natural progression, and it's an unfortunate thing, and it goes back to being as self-sufficient as you could be and being mobile. So the castle doctrine,
the castle,
right?
Yeah.
The castle doctrine is just not going to work in those
Can't
things
take it with you.
right? And so that's why I have focused both in my time, with the military. The only thing I could do, I couldn't fix all these external things. What could I fix? I can fix individuals. I can do what I can to give them knowledge. We talk about, we educate for the unknown, we train for the known. So, instead of going in and say, we're going to rub sticks together, we're going to do this or that. Well, let's talk about the whole big picture first. What do we really need to do? Let's understand it, and then we'll go back and start talking about what skill sets do I need?
Right.
Because some you might already have,
Sure.
And then after all of that, then we'll talk about, peppering you with a little bit of some components and kits or whatever to do that. Because some of this stuff you can do with nothing. And isn't it great that, I've got this, survival kit between my ears. It's the same cube. It weighs the same, whether I fill it with some of this knowledge or I fill it with Kardashian trivia. So, and I just think that, it's unfortunate that some of the things that earlier generations got access to, it's like if you were in the Boy Scouts, I didn't. YMCA had the Indian guides, and they had these things that were teaching you, life skills.
Yeah.
But they were life skills, really.
Leadership skills,
right? It really, all of that,
yeah,
exactly. All of that. And whether you ever used it, because you did outdoor tasks, hunting, fishing, whatever, or you really didn't, but they're life skills, absolutely. And nature is a great classroom for that kind of stuff. And that's, again, back to why the SERE stuff just really spoke that side of it, And I also appreciate the psychological side of interactions between people, because I would say some of the younger generations are as connected as they are, as much as they communicate, the more through text and things like that. I will say they don't care for this as much, except with their friends. But when, I look at Carvana, this is just me, but I look at the Carvana kind of thing. It blew up. So, it's novel, but when I thought about it, it's like, that's very popular. But in most cases, to get it out of this, looks like a big, this big building even that looks like almost like a,
the cube with all the cars
machine,
in it.
right? The big vending machine.
Well, that's exactly what it looks like.
And so, because it's really what it is. But the reality is, they don't have to sit across a table to the used car salesman
and have a negotiation.
Right. Because that's a challenge. They feel intimidated by that. It's a car salesman, not some, enemy.
It's not a dictator or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just,
it's not
it's not a some kidnap. It's interesting to me that if that's going to be a kind of a bit of a hitch in your step in life, if you don't, how are you going to ever, talk with other people to negotiate a raise or better, whatever. I don't understand, I do understand it, but it's in that, but we talk about being connected, but we would just say we don't do the analog stuff as much for those who, and I've seen it because I've watched, I've got 4 decades, 2 decades in the military, and now with my company that I started in 2005, which is Solcoa, and we do this. This is all we do. Solcoa, it stands for I had to come up with my own word to get 4 to 6 letters, even in 2005, .com that wasn't already taken,
That's so
but
great.
it means soul is a contraction of Latin word solus, which means alone or isolated. And then koa is the Hawaiian Polynesian word. So I served there for a while, for warrior. So it's the lone warrior, it's the isolated, soldier, sailor, airman,
Got
marine,
it.
and
Clever.
and it's really what, and we are the only Sulco out there, so that's good. But it was, I planted my flag saying, this is what I want to do. And in the end, though, figuratively, what we've realized over the years, because, we've done we've been as contractors, whether in subcontractor role, the prime vendor role, to contracting to the SERE schools and providing, usually veteran, they're all generally veterans and or retiree military. They've got a lot of experience. We go back to they're my age. You go back to the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
that's a different game.
Oh, right. I mean, it's not like contingent warfare or the things, and it's certainly not going to have, if we ever have, and I hope, pray that we don't ever have another major theater war, is that the kind of response that we had in some of the conflicts in CENTCOM, which is the Afghanistan, Iraq, where we had quick reaction forces that could roll in pretty quick, much like we have at home, 911, and it has a certain amount of time, but pretty darn quick in some footprints, notwithstanding weather or other things. But is that's not going to be the paradigm in something that a near peer adversary. So it goes back to the old days of, you're going to have to be on your own much longer. Not that you have to do it on your own.
No,
you could set the conditions for success.
But that's what you were just talking about there, and the ability to be able to work with other people. There's some currency in that. Yeah. And negotiation and reading people, understanding the room, having a high level of awareness of your actual situation. Right.
That and the and you taking the initiative to set, like I said, set the condition. If you don't feel like, if I said, hey, we're going to go for a day hike, we're back up in the front range of Colorado, we're going to just go for a day hike up here around, foothills, Pikes Peak or whatever, and that's all I said, then, you kind of, make sure you got your hiking shoes on or whatever, but, it's okay, maybe a bottle of water. But now if I said, to anybody just saying, hey, we're going to go for a day hike, but you might want to, we should have some stuff just, might want to expect it may happen that we have to spend the night. It's like, well, what? I thought it was a day hike, he just changed it on me. It's like, well, I mean, that's always there, right? I mean, people get
all the time
misoriented. It's over.
The taxpayer pays hundreds, millions and millions of dollars a year for people that thought they were just going out on a day hike. Yeah.
It was almost 3/4,
or for a boat ride.
70 or 75%, I think, that of people who spend an unexpected overnight, just here in the U.S., just in the backcountry, is from getting misoriented. It's not equipment failure. It's not other, it's not being mauled by flora, fauna, whatever.
Right.
It's literally they get just turned around, right? Yeah. Or the battery, or they're using, certainly all the tools that we have, which are great, until the battery dies. You drop it and it breaks. You drop it in the water, whatever, and then you're left to your own devices. Now, back to, if you had those base skills, is
that a big deal? Yeah.
It really isn't. You could get yourself reoriented, sit and do some mental mapping, some other techniques. You could just get you right, But I think Daniel Boone has a quote, at least attributed to him, to saying, I've never been lost, but, I have been, it's like misoriented for a few days.
For a little bit, for a period of time, going back to the time and distance.
But and the thing is, he's not admitting, failure.
Right.
He's just, okay. And I mean, obviously, thinking that time frame, you only had celestial cues and maybe just a little bit on the as far as analog compass style,
right?
But
direction finding, that.
Right? But it is a mindset again to say, are you going to take? And well, what should I take? And goes back to training. Well, what's enough? What's enough for you for this environment to be able to maintain 98.6? And because we've had it where people just one night, and we have, and God help you if it rains. I mean, because you add rain, and you're going to suck 25 times, the heat from your body that much faster than just being dry. So if you can't keep, from staying or getting wet, or getting at least dry again if you get wet, and having a temperature drop, which in high mountain desert kind of things, you can have 30, 40 degree differences between, and you start adding altitude, it drops even faster. People get caught just, because they're down, let's say, in a lower area where it's warm, and then they go hike up, and then again, all these things happen all at once, and it just overwhelms them.
Mhm.
Literally within hours, they expire. They get misoriented, and they literally curl up and pass. And it's happening here in a developed nation
all the time
now.
Yeah.
And so if that's the case, but these skill sets, and just mindsets go beyond that. Again, I don't ever hike. I'm not going to go up the mountain. I don't go except in my little park that's 15 acres.
Right.
I'm not going to get that lost. Okay, well, but then these things, like I said, taking the initiative to set up yourself for success. And that's both what you can do, what you bring to the table, whatever else you need, but also working with other people. Who do you need to work with? And don't assume that, well, that's their job, they should know to do that or what. No, you don't know any of that. And so, and I think and whether you're an entrepreneur or you're in business of any kind, or you're just doing what you're doing, if you're just volunteering, if you want to succeed, you're going to have to bring all this stuff to bear. And there are frameworks for this kind of stuff that you can go through, but that's a big part of what we've done of bringing best practices from the military thing and turning it into a human thing, which it is.
Yep.
And saying, how can this help you through life to get to a level of fulfillment? That doesn't mean you started a business. It doesn't mean whatever fulfillment is for you, because the fortitude, all that we're talking about, gives you freedom.
Yeah, I got a question here. So it's interesting to me, and I have my own theories on this, and I often think about it, which is really kind of the roots of the show.
Yeah.
Or at least this subject matter, what we're talking about, it all interplays. But we've been introduced as humans, like recently, we just kind of talked about this. Things a few years ago got a little weird, air quotes,
Yep.
a little weird. And every single person on the planet that has access to any kind of media or whatever else, right, or was aware of the things that were happening at any level, they became aware pretty quick. And they all saw that weirdness. Like they all saw it get a little bit weird, right? And everybody felt either a little or a lot exposed, and we saw it get weirder as a result.
Right.
And even with that, and going through that experience, like I see the same humans being very resistant to even wanting to accept or make any change, to not being caught in that situation again. And let me articulate this even a little bit further. And that would be, first off, like, it was toilet paper, which was weird, right? Like this,
right.
So we all laugh about that. And it was toilet paper.
That's the first thing that came to mind.
Man, I was in there and the toilet paper was gone. I was watching people walking out with toilet paper.
Right.
So
what did they do before
I
toilet
don't
paper
know.
or disposable diapers? What did people do?
But it also, like, it didn't take long before people that were looking at the toilet paper thing, maybe you and I or whoever, looking at toilet paper and going, if these people are doing that with toilet paper, we're going to be in big trouble real fast. Right? And so it's very reactionary. But at the same time, there were some of us that were like, this is why we've prepared and thought about things and whatever, in case this stuff happens. So the question is I think, like, with this resistance to wanting to do the next thing, which is, let me think about this differently. And I think part of the question is like, how, for those people that are thinking about it, but they only started thinking about it when they saw things get a little bit weird, and they've accepted, like, oh, that was a little scary. I don't want to be in that situation again. Right. I should go out and learn a little bit more about stuff. And then when they go search for it, because so they go to YouTube, or wherever, what they see are two very different tribes. They see two different things. They see the mountaintop savage who's talking about skinning deer and trapping and things like that, talking about prepping, who lives in a cabin or a tent.
Wearing buckskin.
Yeah, in the side of a mountain.
Living history, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Daniel Boone, right? Down to the urban prepper who is like got a, bomb shelter in the back that's stocked full of canned food and, gas masks and all this stuff.
Right.
And they're looking at it going, neither of these people are talking to me. Like, or if they are, I don't understand this language.
Right. Or that doesn't seem like my tribe. I'm just, again, the people that are calling us, I think they come to us are, I don't think they identify with either of those necessarily. And they're looking for some level of, you do not have to have, I'll be the first to say, SERE instructors certainly have gone through some level. If you are an instructor, within a SERE program, I mean, going to SERE, that's one thing. People go to basic training. That doesn't make them drill instructors.
Right.
But they did go through basic training in the same in SERE. But you go through it once, however long that is for the programs are now, between 2 and 3 weeks. But then you go on to another level of sophistication and vetting to be an instructor. But that's also just for the military. Now, you take that over to where do you get that? There is nothing like that. And that's why it's very easy to hang a shingle out here and say, because I have done this for so long, or self-taught. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, there are people out there who've written books. Cody Lundine's comes to mind, is more contemporary. Got Morse Kachansky. You got all these different guys who are either from long ago or who grew up in areas or at other schools. There's some civilian schools. I think it was where Cody started, and he wrote the book like 98.6, The Art of Keeping Your Ass Alive. Yeah. And he was on that show, the dual survival. He was one of the two, and they had some other ones that came from a military background and of different types. But I will say there's a tendency to you be careful when you're reaching out to say, who am I accessing to? The bottom line is get somebody who at least has some level of either vetting or a history. If they are self-taught, which again, you don't have to go to Juilliard to become, a musician,
right?
But be world class. You could be self-taught and all of that. But I mean, just be very careful about who you're, because it is very easy. The other thing would be there are great instructors to a local region, and so they know everything about that. And that's like having guides, right? Having mountain guides who know that particular range. You could be climbing for years, but you've never done it in Patagonia. So if you didn't have some local guides, just kind of give you a little, here's the unique things about this area.
The flora, the fauna, the terrain, the weather, all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You would be remiss if you were going to bypass that. Hey, I've been climbing for, however long. Yeah, well, maybe not in here.
Yeah, if you live in the Amazon, how much, how important is learning how to survive in the desert?
Right. But even amongst, deserts or jungle, there are different enough that it warrants at least, getting local. But that's different than going somebody in your neighborhood who does a lot of this stuff locally, but then you're going to now carry this somewhere else to, whether it's abroad or for use in the scenarios you were given, which is much more saying from my home, and they're talking, and maybe their home is elsewhere. Like they have a home, down in Florida, which is in a hurricane belt, versus that they go to, and I'll just say that there is, anybody can start a YouTube channel, and anybody can, hang a shingle out there on the web, and this stuff, certainly we saw it with even the reality TV had few, and they are of different levels sometimes. Understanding TV is always trying to just to go over the top, and just get just things on social media. It tries to do something over the top just to get eyeballs on it, and it's not always, of course, it's sensationalized and it's not even practical, but. If you're going to do this, you probably want to get to somebody who's got some level of professional understanding and has done it for a bunch of different sort of constituent bases or clients.
Let's just say your market segments.
Right. Yep. I mean, even the services. Having done it for different services, I will tell you that even you think, well, military is military. Yes and no. Each service is quite, and even within the services, you have branches and all kinds of things. I mean, they do things differently, and the paradigms are different. They're over water, or they're in the mountains more, or just like I said, unit level. So that's different enough. But when you take out the military thing, and we started doing stuff for other federal agencies and doing their training programs, we started from scratch. We understood the principles, but we're not coming here to put a military program onto them.
What are the needs here?
And we're principle based and sort of a priori. And because I spent some of my time in the military within special mission unit world, those guys are, when you're in that top tier level, they train themselves. All right, they're we call autodidactic. They're self learners and they have to be, because there's not really another level above them that that, other
gonna
than
filter
within.
it down.
Right. They train their own at a base level, but then as things change and as new challenges arise, they have to, come up with the solution set. And that was something I got, so few in the military get to be able to get to that level until you get to maybe the doctrinal level or work in that, usually we're retired by that time working as a contractor or a civil servant. But to get to do that while you're active is very rare for most people. And so I came at this early to just think that way. Now, I'll just say some institutions don't like that. They really don't. But this is the way we do it. Do not change a thing. And that's what you have to do. Right. But I would say that's not for regular people out there. No, you need to figure out for you what you need, what you or your family, your circle needs. What are the unique aspects of that? And then start filling. And again, how much? Enough.
Right.
What's enough for you?
You have to decide that for yourself. Yeah.
And your risk tolerance, all that. So it's the same for business. It's the same for, I think I mentioned, I don't know where the quote came from that said, you could boil business school down to about 4 words, keep your options open, and so it is because we're always adapting. If you don't, you're gonna, it's never, your pro forma hockey stick, kind of things. Your for profit and loss is up and to the right until it's not,
until it isn't,
and it's a roller coaster because it's never, it's never a straight line between the 2 points. It's all over the map, and you just gotta roll with the punches. But and I think that's what I love about that whole contingent thing, that this is really life and however it manifests for you. And when something that, that you can adapt, you can take another path, you can endure. And it's all about, it comes from your own will. That same will to survive is also a will to want to follow your passion. And all I can say is that those things is that you have to decide, when do I think I am self-sufficient? When somebody tells me, you're good now.
Right.
If I don't feel it,
how do you know?
It ain't there.
Yeah. How do you know when you've arrived?
Well, you gotta own it and or feel it. In aviation, that's why we did, you solo. Yep. You get up there, and that was the great thing is that
the proof is in the pudding.
Go. Right. And any pilot out there will tell you, they remember their solo.
Yeah. They
absolutely do, because at that point, they were like, the stark reality is there is nobody here.
Yeah.
And it's funny that's I think it's great, and sometimes that's been, if you put somebody else in the other seat, because it's let's say a 2-seat aircraft, you're not letting somebody actually go and fly it truly solo. It's solo, but you've got...
That's not solo.
It's not exactly.
It's not solo.
Is exactly. It's like somebody holding your hand if you were out here in the outback, and, well, if you've got an instructor with you, you have an out. Yeah.
It's like business too.
And so the SERE IQC had a whole period we were out by ourselves, separated from everybody else. And so, you got to solo per se. And so few people, again, get that. I'm saying in anything in their life. And
I'm with you.
Yeah. And so that is what I call, that's that ownership of that. So that gives the next thing of that freedom, because for somebody to say, well, you're an American, you're free.
Are you? That's a great question.
It's one of those. If you don't feel it, doesn't matter if people tell me, free butt, free cab. Certainly there's, we can say that we know that there's limits, but, to say that what is freedom? And I would just say it's like physics. There's some aspects of freedom, there's aspects of physics, but how do we apply it? What's applied physics? Now we're talking engineering. We're building stuff. We're doing stuff. It's not just theory. It's like same for freedom. So I would call almost that is that this thing I'm talking about is that when you do it for yourself, you're now got freedom. And now it's about, and you've got it because you got the 40. I can walk away at any time, and I've got this. I can walk away from chaos or mayhem. I can, and I'm going to be okay. No, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be necessarily fun, but I've got that. And it's a level of, it's amazing when that, and it's the same thing with being financially free. This is not an amount. I was just going to
say, this is a metaphor for life.
Absolutely. Man. It's not an amount. It's not, you can't put an amount on it. I am free when I'm not highly levered, or I'm not, I'm saying that I can, have options. I have optionality. And freedom of options, freedom of action is really what you're doing in survival. Evasion is that keeping your options open and keeping your freedom of optionality that's what you need as we enter a period that I think most would admit is probably going to be a little more upsetting and chaotic than it is going to be solid and
Right.
up and to the right and
Yeah.
all
Well,
of
it's not going to be as easily projectable,
that. Right.
if you will. It's going to be a little weird.
Exactly. And I think that's where, that's where this goes of just saying that applied freedom and the application of freedom is for what? Just to be free? Well, no. It is to then, now, you have no excuse, but to pursue what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And that's what we say. That's the way I kind of do it. What would you do if no excuses? You can't say, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm too big, I'm too small, I'm too this, I'm too that, I'm too whatever. If you were to truly, without the typical limits we put on things, what would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? Marinate in that, and then if you can be honest, to say, I know what that is, but already you start here. Your head's already starting to do it to say,
try to put limitations on it, right?
I'm this age, whatever. I mean, I started my company. I was 41, turning 42 when I started my company, and then and now I'm 61. Got almost 20 years of here doing this, and it's like, I don't know. Maybe this will continue. Maybe there's another. Not that it has to happen in 20-year segments, but the thing is, you can reinvent yourself. And I remember, the quote about KFC or good old Colonel Sanders and KFC when he was in his early 60s when he kicked off a national franchise that's still around today. I mean, there's a legacy for you.
Empire, yeah, that's what he's done. So you actually were bringing up a topic that actually has just been covered a couple of times just in the last couple of days with some really great people that are, I don't want to say reinventing themselves, but they're hitting those next stages where I have to ask myself, what do I need to do next in order to get here, and who do I need to be aligned with, and where do I go for this information, and also recognizing that things are changing, so they have to adapt and evolve. This just goes back to SERE acronym, right? And all the things that are there. What am I doing right now? And I think a lot of them have realized, not a lot of them, but a lot of people have realized they've just been surviving, right? And they get stuck, and that's all they're doing. They just get stopped right there with just, I'm surviving. It's fine. But there isn't really a consequence of that, or that they've noticed yet. And so they're out there looking for answers, and they can kind of just be languishing in that survival. And that can be sometimes it's good, because when you're doing that, at some point, maybe you do get hit in the side of the head because you haven't been paying attention, and it does drive the next decision, or it wakes you up, or it helps you realize and become aware of, oh, this is what I need to do next. And you move through. And I was going back to what happened in the last few years with COVID and things. I mean, I think people are just kind of hanging out in that, but that's still languishing, still not figuring it out, still being afraid, still being, it's fine. Yeah.
It's also common to think that it's going to happen in some phase. And I'm saying the phase that comes with, I'm retiring.
Yeah.
Now, whether I retire, how many times have I retired? Well, I retired from the military. You call it retirement because you get a retirement of some level after 20 to 30 years.
There's a start and stop.
But am I retired? I didn't start gardening or golfing or whatever. I mean, then I was like off to the next, whoever. It's not my thing, but works for some. And the same thing now of just saying, to get to a level and say, but it's going to be better, because my son just graduated his master's degree, and he had, of course, go through COVID during his college years. But it's just like when you graduate, you knew that, hey, the next thing's going to be great. Hey, the future's going to, everything's up. And there's a lot of military, I think, when they and I think I would have to assume pro athletes, others, right? When you've gotten to be out there on the field doing the stuff that you're doing, and then you have to take off the uniform, take off the pads, even if, there's a bittersweet thing there. Well, there's a period of time that you've got to go wreck your body, and you can be hard, and you can be, and you can say, pain is weakness leaving the body and all that stuff, but that stuff comes back to haunt you. Oh yeah,
catch up. I'll sleep when I'm dead.
That's right. That grind, and I've done my period now here of 4 decades since college, but it's but you always think it's the next thing coming.
Right.
That it's going to happen here. It's going to happen here. And then, it maybe it doesn't happen. Or when you get there, it's different than you thought. Maybe the economy's crap. I'm just saying that you've been putting stuff away, and now if through inflation, debasement of the currency,
right.
Money doesn't go as far as it did or as you thought it would. Hey, do I have enough? All these suddenly now you've got all this trepidation and all this rather than, and you're looking at it again from a survival or a hunker in your bunker in a different way rather than, all right, what's the next adventure?
Opportunity. Yeah.
Right. What can I come up with? Can I lean in and try something new? And that's pretty much brings us to where I'm at
right
because
now.
We're
great spot.
We're at a place now that the one thing I did not see. Most of everything we do is experiential training. When you're doing it in a school in the military, of course it's
right.
hands-on.
You're there. You're doing it.
You're
doing the thing. Yeah.
And most would agree that this kind of topic would be is needed for that.
Relevant.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But and anybody who's been in the military, especially in the past, remembers their computer-based training, as they would call it. It was just so
miserable,
so awful. Yeah. You just wanted to hang
the online training stuff at the time.
It was just so bad, and and probably because it has to be, one, it was old in those days, and we're getting much better.
It was antiquated,
but and so if you ever said, well, how about computer-based training and the stuff that you do? And I'm like, no, I just because to me it was a cop out, or it was just you wouldn't be able to do it. Nobody's going to want to do that. But then I watched what happened during COVID. Is that you had
online.
Well, yeah, and who killed it? Masterclass and all these kind of things,
example.
right?
Yeah.
Right. And so had we had something as a way to do that, to augment what we do, sort of a kind of a multimodal way. We still have live training, but we could use it for preparatory training. We could use it for sustainment training if we had an online learning management type system or, apps kind of stuff. And so we have been working for some time now this year since the spring, because it takes a long time to code this stuff. But we've actually, and rather than, I know I could go, use YouTube and these kind of things, and we will for marketing kind of stuff. But the reality is, because we've sat in the shadows. It's kind of what you kind of have to do for some of our stuff. There's things we don't discuss, and there's things that we don't, or clients and things that we serve. But just like other big corporations, they serve the government in some ways, and they serve the commercial market in others. And that's really what we're going to do. But we know that there's many things that we have that are the human things that we can help. We have already saved lives. We've done it with our product. We've done it with our training. Both on both sides. We've gotten, the after actions from people who said thank you and stuff. I was in this country and this, and if I didn't have this kit, or if I didn't, know to do this, what you said, could have been worse.
Very validating.
And it is. It's yeah. I still love teaching, but that's icing on the cake.
That's the best paycheck, right? That's
absolutely.
The best part. It's like the bonus. Yeah.
So we're doing this, we've got a couple, basically have an Android and a iOS and a web-based, portal by which, you could access training and other kinds of things, both support the kitting stuff that we have and also support a way to get there if you had no other way to do it and you can't. And then at some point we could still pepper in that we could go do live training things to vet out that you can do it, to a certain standard.
People are still going to want that.
Oh, sure.
Right. What you're just saying is like that was all of a sudden inaccessible because there were roadblocks.
Right.
This goes back to, again, like,
and it's also, we can't, if we had a weekend, most people could only give, you have a weekend. Even if we had the whole weekend or you only just had a Saturday, I'm supposed to teach you everything you need to know in this. I mean, that's like, I'm also going to make you a black belt in this.
So that's something we talk about on the show a lot, just with like the training space or the coaching space. Like you go to a weekend certification, somebody throws a piece of paper at you, and the next thing you know, firearms instruction and everything else. Like, no, it doesn't work like that. And I think part of it is like in terms of what people have access to. Well, some people don't have the weekend. Like they work on the weekends. Like
that too.
I mean, I hear that a lot from, in the firearms training space, especially we're talking like LEO or whatever. Like I work the weekends. Most of these classes happen on the weekends. I cannot go. You could take time off. Yeah. But that means I don't get paid or, like maybe my department doesn't doesn't TikTok. What are my options?
Right.
And I think that's what you were talking about.
This is the best way that we can scale in a way, because what happens, unfortunately, in the contracting space is that, just like our topic,
it's like feast and famine.
It is. Yeah. It's a sine wave of, this is really important. Nobody cares.
Yep.
And we're in conflict. Real important. Okay, we're back in peacetime. Nobody cares. And or the same thing with budgets. And all that kind of stuff. Although right now budgets keep going up, but then there's just more things to distribute it to. Mm-hmm. So in the end, contingency sort of things, by exception contingencies, not primary shoot, move, communicate stuff, tends to get pushed
off
to
the
the
plate,
side,
just like you said.
And when you commoditize things like that, it's just it's unfortunate. What I find is that for some of our organizations, when the people that are making the decisions are at risk themselves because they travel, or they directly have people that work for them that travel,
that it becomes a priority.
Yeah. It becomes much more of a priority than those who are so far removed from it. There is no connection. And so it's easy to then make decisions based on what's on sale, we're race to zero on price kind of thing. And that's the only metric of quality. And it's unfortunate,
the lowest
but that's
metric that can possibly be measured.
And I use something that I've said to people I think it kind of sets it home, is like, nobody wants a cheap parachute. Not if they have to jump it.
They're not going to buy their parachute at Costco.
Right, exactly. And if brain surgery, whatever you pay, you're not out there hunting for who's the cheapest. But unfortunately, there's a lot of those things in some elements of contracting that are just done that way. Mm-hmm. So it's
who
just
suffers? Who suffers in the end?
I've watched this. I mean, it's not an anecdotal thing. I've got a couple decades now of watching this. And I even kind of saw it a bit before, even when I was active duty. I could kind of see that happening before I ever entered this space now as a contractor. So, but anyway, we already have we've been struggling with our commercial. The only commercial face we have really is our product, which is the SOCOA Survival Systems S3. But it's SOCOAsurvival.com is sort of an e-commerce site for kits. People, in fact, a lot of people in the community only think that's what we do. They only know us from that. And since COVID, it decimated the vendor world and our supply chains. I'm here at SHOT to try to, I'm reinstituting those, that either rebuilding some and relationships and or even finding new ones where we can, just to finish out what we had fixed for so long, and then it just got torn apart, and who's to say that it's not, we're not done. Yeah. We're pandemic or disease X or whatever else we're talking about.
Whatever we're talking about.
Yeah, I don't, they keep talking about these things like, all right, it's like they're Nostradamus.
Yep. Weird. Go back to that word.
But yes, weird. But whatever, even without that, as things get, people are interested, we make quality stuff. We don't compromise on that. I don't make novelty kits, we use the same quality that we do for what we do for, SOF and top tier organizations. So they don't have to worry about that. But I'm having a heck of a time in some cases of getting stuff, and I wasn't willing to pull the trigger until I was ready, because I knew once we did, I know there'd be a pretty big demand. And we, like everybody else, had to reconfigure during COVID because it just wasn't the demand. And now the problem is, of course, is that, well, people are hurting financially because of just the inflation. And it's abated a little bit, but it ain't gone. And I think most people would assume that there's more bad stuff ahead. It can be optimistic long term, but I do think that it's
got to get worse before it gets better.
I think there's some more pain ahead. I think most people would say, and we're in an election year, so just forget it. That's going to be enough to disrupt things too.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah. So for people to, again, you mentioned the products and SOCOA Survival, specific to the kits and stuff like that.
That's the one that's still on our SOCOA website, or SOCOA.com. If you go to that, it's right now you'll see it's down. And I'll just say that maybe some little gamesmanship on my part just to pull it. When you're in
when people are desperate and they're trying to find an answer to their own problems.
Right. Well, it's I would just say, sometimes, Well, in the contracting world, everybody's an expert in the topic that comes up. If what you do is just bid on everything.
Yep.
I stay in my lane here of what we've done since the get-go. So, but yeah, I don't like it. People go to my website and just kind of copy a few bars and then be able to, build a proposal out of that. It's kind of, so what I've done, is I pulled it, but also we pulled it because I didn't want to think that Sulco is still the defense contractor that we had been, a government contractor that we'd been for so long.
Got to change things a bit, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that when they go to it now, they see of what we are coming. We are still doing, that sits over here, and what we're doing now for a larger market. We've already been doing it, like I said, for a decade for some of the other, Department of Energy and some others. And so it's... But now we can do it for more of a B2C where people can come.
It's going to diversify it, right?
Yeah, whether organizational or straight to individuals.
I've had so many conversations this weekend with, small business or, smaller business that are maybe, on the fringes of being able to bid for these government contracts and whatnot. And it's all the same story, man. It's, everybody is really struggling to get these things. And, going back to the race to the bottom, on price. Yep. And there's talking about a couple of firearms companies that are basically giving product away, where they're not even making, a profit on it, which just destroys, and people don't understand how that trickles down and how that destroys the smaller business.
Oh, absolutely.
In terms of all the things that they're trying to do. And, maybe monopolization of supply chain, somebody getting bids on things that basically just knock the other guys out of it, and they're not even competing for those big contracts. They're just trying to do their thing with their own consumer base.
Right.
Yeah, I had quite a talk with Gabe from Cobalt Rifles on that, and just kind of that episode will air some other time. But to give people insight to the things that, for company owners like yourself, that they're challenged by, to get the things out there. So going back to freedom and are you free, right? And what kind of American are you? In terms of how where you decide to put your dollar, and who you're putting it into. These guys like you are having to really, it's hard enough to run a business, right? And do the right thing and earn a profit under, the rules and the constraints that are there. But if you're having to fight with other people, on it that you shouldn't have to be fighting with, there's plenty of pie for everybody, right? There is. There's plenty of pie. That's a whole other thing.
You could have a lot more win-win, quite frankly, and where people are just organically going after. Because if it's always, if your idea of business is win-lose, because there's that, just we're in the octagon. I'm gonna, I'm taking you out.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, and I get that I guess at some levels of business, but I also see, for the smaller businesses, small to mid-sized businesses, especially if you're trying to go for some that are wanting to think about coming into the government contracts because they see these big numbers and it seems like, you will not touch anything that's not firm fixed price as a small business, not for a long time. And firm fixed price means you bid on it, maybe back 17, 18. Long before COVID, and you're on a firm fixed price. I don't know. I didn't have a crystal ball. I don't think anybody else did back then that was going to happen.
Right?
And then we're going to see a 40-year high inflation like I remember when I was coming out of high school in the 1980s, but 40-year high inflation. And you say, well, yeah, but there's cost of living adjustments and all of that. Well, yeah, there are for the military, and there are for maybe civil servants, and there are for even Social Security recipients. But, it's really up to it's like an ethereal space to say, well, who out there between the government and you got like the Department of Labor and other kinds of things who's kind of make these adjustments because our contracts, if we bid it, you got to live by it.
Right.
In other words, you said this, you execute. And that's one of the things that, this was...
That liability is huge.
Of course it is, because you could be upside down.
It'll bankrupt you.
Exactly, because those margins with those big contracts for putting this are very thin. Most people in the commercial space would be shocked to know how thin those things are. So when you add something like that kind of inflation, you either got to adapt and you start really thinning out your overhead and your, basically your office, your back end space. And, you can actually get to where after 10 years or 15 or 20 years that you're operating like a startup again.
Yeah.
Because you have to. Now, not habitually, but just to get through this painful spot.
I think people feel squeezed right now.
Sure.
And I think,
it's happening to everybody. And I think they realize it, but it puts business owners now in a hard place here. And I see it. We're going to do what we can to keep, I will say this, when it's our IP, when it's our, our intellectual and our and we're putting it out there, okay, that gives me a lot more latitude of what because,
Right.
it's been developed over all this time. And so there's a lot of, and there's a lot of infrastructure costs of what we've already spent on the coding and getting all these people and the servers and the back end. It costs, that's going to have a certain cost structure. But once we get to it, I feel like we have, at least for the first time, at least in my business life, more control than the always bidding down to, inverted eBay, I would call it. And, or I'm at the mercy of just product kind of things.
Yep.
and building kits. We make some things that are unique to Solcoa, things that just didn't exist that help us put it together. But in the end, I don't make water purifiers. I don't make multi-tools. I don't make some of these things. I don't need to. There's good products out there.
Mm-hmm.
But then when, they're wrestling with their own things and then SKUs come and go, or they don't go into production. You can't buy cases anymore. Now you got to buy pallets of stuff to get. I mean, it's like a whole nother level of challenge, and that's just my own thing. But I'm really not a product company. We're a service education and training company. But the product thing was just an add-on. But I'm sure everybody's going through their own pain.
Well, yeah, they're definitely doing that, and I think everybody knows, despite what you may be hearing coming out of whoever's mouth at whatever level of whatever government and media and all that stuff. But again, just going back to people being squeezed, and all the things you just did a really good job of articulating that. For hopefully people stuck with that and they understand. Again, going back to how they're spending their dollars, and
right.
that kind of just the kind of discussions that go on the back end. I mean, like from people that are trying to get involved in conversations they probably shouldn't be involved with. But where I'm going with this is people are being squeezed, and oftentimes that drives. We'll go back to the word and term opportunist. And so what you're seeing is people behaving badly in my mind, right? Doing the wrong thing, not doing the right thing, actually doing really bad things,
right?
At the expense of an employee, another company, a support company, their own people. And that's, I think people are kind of seeing that pop up a little bit more. And I think it's likely as a result of what you're talking about, because that competition turns in, we're back to survival, and people do some weird stuff.
I think if you have where, that's a devolving out of into already taking a chaotic situation, and now where, I mean, you have everything from, I think there's been studies with, they use rats and things, and they get them in this kind of thing, and they start going right to cannibalistic kind of stuff. Right. Yeah. Exactly. And that kind of thing, thinking, well, but we're not at that. I mean, come on. I mean, it may feel like it because we're in a developed nation and we've had what we've had here. One thing I did that I witnessed in growing up through starting a business in the early days, and is that I was going to all the free stuff. The Small Business Administration has these kind of things. And what you saw at those, because they're free and available to anyone about, how to get business licenses and do all just the basic stuff you wouldn't, even if you got a master's in business, they don't teach that kind of stuff, right? They're teaching, statistics and accounting and all that kind of stuff, but not this kind of stuff. So I found when I went to those, because I'm interested to make sure we're crossing T's and dotting I's, what I saw was a room filled many times with heavily with immigrants. I mean, very, very fresh immigrants from all over the world, and with where they were struggling with English, but they're in there and they're intently studying. And what I found is, not surprised, but in some ways, as I went more to more in different places, in different states, I saw it again and again, and I started going, wow, this starts to make sense to me. That these people who come from places who have no safety net,
they have less. Yeah.
They always had less, and they never had anything. Well, I have safety nets, basically, whether through the social, housing, urban development, HHS, whatever we have, or what they have in say Europe and first world,
Dependency and continuous
if
care
you
model.
didn't bring something of value, make something of value, a good, a service that could be sold in that, organically within
You
your,
didn't survive.
and you can't screw over your own community.
Yep.
Try exactly, because they're gonna, they know
That,
it's a small
that is
place.
the worst thing you can do.
Right. And so they're going to do the right thing. And so they know how to do it. But they certainly, there's no market there in those countries. They come here and they get here however they can and realize there's a lot of stuff on illegal, but, obviously, hopefully legally. But many of them come here, at least through the years. Now, again, I'm talking 20 years ago when I was starting the business, and they just want a chance that was denied them there. And what I saw time and time again is they're just around you. These aren't people who, they are around you. They're in the restaurants and the convenience stores and maybe a cleaners or whatever that they have started in an organic way, very simply, and incrementally grew it. But I will tell you, I see these people within the neighborhoods within 3 to 5 years, they have some level of financial independence, something that eludes. Unfortunately, so many American families, because we grew up and our educational system did it to us, because it was built on you go to school, you get a diploma at whatever level, and you get a job.
There's a job waiting for you. You do that for 30 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And somebody else has a job for me.
Yeah.
These other countries, that's not a given. It's not a given at all. If you want a job, create a job. And so they were forced into entrepreneurship. And again, I'm not trying to push entrepreneurship. You got to want it, and that hopefully you're doing it in a passion, not something that somebody said was a sure thing. This is going to be the next big thing, so get into it. You don't even care about it. You've got to do something that you would do for free. That it's got to be that, or what you would do if you knew you couldn't fail, kind of thing.
Fail.
I mean, you're and you know what? If you don't quit, you never really fail, right? Because in the end, it's going to be a hell of a journey and an adventure, and however you craft it, you could start a nonprofit, you could lead other kinds of things, you could
so
lead
much opportunity,
and maybe you just want to I want to design stuff. I don't want to do the back end. I want to be responsible for all this stuff. But you then find the startup that gives you the opportunity to do design, whatever it is. There's just much opportunity out there, and I would just, if I was talking to young people, I would just say, the future seems more like it's going to be, especially with AI taking a lot of jobs and all that kind of stuff. I would just submit, find what you have. It's not going to be how many canned goods and freeze-dried stuff and rounds and weapon systems or whatever else you put in all your, preps for that kind of stuff.
For all the things you've concocted in your head.
In this case, it's going to be, you want to talk about barterable, what's barterable? Yeah, skills, knowledge and skill. If you're valuable and across different things, and just like it is in an organic community today, carpentry, welding, all kinds of those kind of things can be just as sellable, tradable, all of that. And I'm not saying but I'm saying if it is, and not for this, Teotihuacan, the SHT, all these things that they say about, some apocalyptic thing or something going off the rails here. No, I'm saying in life, we're not talking about survival. We're talking about thriving, that these same things could be a stepping stone for you to thrive now. Because for all the only criticism I have for some of the ones that are the staunch, I would say call it more fringe to save some degree on when it goes to a linear negative, which is, that when bad things happen, that's when I'm going to really shine.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. Yeah. So you're not shining now while what everything's normal. How on earth are you now going to catapult because you have this stuff, or because, no, it's not, because the people I know who can handle stuff, who've done, are doing well now.
They're working now.
They're doing well now. Yeah. And they're going to do, and then they, good, bad, they're going to deal with things. But at some point, they're probably going to roll with it a little better. And, so again, these are knowledge and skills for life.
Yep.
and success and thriving in life, and hopefully for people to walk that ladder to fulfillment. That's really what.
Isn't that interesting? You talked about, folks coming to America to do the things that from situations that are much different than the America that we have, and that's happening a lot right now, right? With what's going on.
Sure.
And there's a lot of people that are just bitching and moaning about this. And look, there are issues, right? There are issues.
Sure.
I've talked about this at length with other guests on the show, and we don't need to open that up. My point of this is, if you're just standing around bitching and moaning, and you're doing that on the backs of other people while they're working hard to make change, and you're, I don't know, getting into a comment section or just casting stones or whatever else, you might want to think about that a little bit, because there's some pretty motivated individuals out there.
Sure.
And they're motivated in a different way than you are. And they're not doing it that doesn't start with, I'm going to build my business by downplaying or talking, trash about somebody else's business or trying to undercut somebody else.
Right.
I'm going to do that through hard work. And when at the end of the day, that hard work starts to pay off and it's not paying off for you, take a hard look in the mirror.
Sure.
And we are in that point, I think, going back to the gets worse before it gets better. Mm. We're right there. I think we're right on the edge. And we talked about this a little bit, just from, again, being self-reliant and being prepared. Like, it doesn't take much. You mentioned the fires in Colorado, right? Mm-hmm. It just takes one little thing to offset the ecosystem a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
To make all of that very, very, very important. Or, just in your face.
Right.
It just puts it right there. And it's relevant. So,
it is. And I back to in the Murphy thing, is that no matter where you are prepared, let's just say at home, you've got everything in both for yourself, your family, you've done all these right things.
Yep.
How often are you at home? You sleep there, you have some breakfast. Mm-hmm. You spend a lot of time at work. How far do you commute? I mean, do you have that? All of our stuff that we've built is generally more individual kind of based, that you've got something on you now to get to the next level. You can't have everything you need at all times. You're going to mount an expedition for all the stuff that you have. So in the end, you have layers. There's ways to do this. And you can also layer your skill sets, because work on the fundamentals and then work on stuff that will also pay dividends in life.
It's the asset versus liability,
right.
I guess equation. Where do you fall in that line? And, not that you have to have all of the assets, right? Build community,
right? Treat
people the right way, right?
Right.
Search out those folks like Bart who want to give you that information and are have done it for a long time and are in this to help people. Yes, they have to make money. It's a business, right? But at the same time, I'd much rather give my money to a guy like Bart, or anybody, as you suggested, somebody that's done this, somebody that's been in it a while, somebody that's not a flash in the pan that started their business 2 years ago by copying somebody else's website, saying they've done a bunch of stuff because they trained on a weekend. Right. And they're good at marketing and selling shit. Sorry.
Right.
And I think that's going back to the younger generation and not really having to go through, understand how that works. Right. Why? Have you ever sat in front of a salesperson before? Do you know what that looks, smells, and feels like? Going back to buying the car.
Right.
Because if you don't know what that looks, smells, or feels like me as an old person, right, and nearing the age of 50 or whatever, I look at that and I'm guilty of it, going, oh, these youngsters, they just don't know. They have no idea, whatever else. To some extent, there's some truth in what I'm saying, but at the other end of it, it's different now.
Oh, it is
different now. But those skills and that ability, that awareness isn't there. It just isn't, because they've never had to go through the situation before. Right. So there are people out there that will help you understand what these situations feel like, young, old, wherever, if we're qualifying or we're siloing people into these different market segments or categories. And that's what I get from a place like SHOT Show, and when I get to sit down and talk to individuals, like yourself, is that wisdom that comes with understanding all that stuff, and the way it's presented, it's in an honest, upfront, like, I know a few things because I've seen a few things. You make your own decisions. Mm-hmm. Here's some things to think about. And that's what the businesses, I think, that are doing a really good job right now are doing, is just putting the question in the mind of the person to have them go through the critical thinking process,
right,
to come up with the answers on their own, knowing once they've done that, now they're in a more informed position to ask the right questions of people like you. And so they know it when they see it.
Right.
Rather than, I know that I don't know this, but I know that what I'm seeing right here looks, smells, and feels right. So I go that way versus throwing your money at a problem expecting, capability or something.
It's a lot of done for you, and that is the norm, and or equipment, and that there's a widget, there's a magic silver bullet of some sort, that's going to, that's just where we are.
Yeah, here, I
Americans,
paid you. Yeah, I paid you, give it to me right now.
It's and you know what? If you're a billionaire, you're surrounded by people that do all that for you, and that's great.
Yep.
Most people, even people that are in the 7-8 figure realm, aren't low. Is that they're, as entrepreneurs, they're not going to have that kind of architecture.
I'm not,
and so you're still on to you.
Yep.
And so I'm hopeful that we can hit a broad section of society as a whole, because what I want to finally fix, I guess, would be something that goes back to 500 BC, 2,500 years. A quote from Heraclitus that also has been, and some people poo-poo it at times, but anyway, this same quote has been supported by current survival psychologists in the last few decades. It's still current today, and that is that. For every, this is from Heraclitus, who was a philosopher way back when, and he worked with the military, wasn't necessarily a general or stuff, but he said that for every 100 men you send us, 10 should not even be here. 80 are nothing but targets. 9 are the real fighters, and we are lucky to have them, for they make the battle.
Wow. That's rich.
But the one.
Yeah.
One is a warrior, and he will bring the others back.
That is rich.
So what it just sets you is what it's saying is you've got a bell curve.
Yep.
And we're not talking the intelligence bell. We're talking a bell curve of about 10% of society is just can't handle it. When something happens, say warfare, or in any of these situations, they're going to do the wrong thing. Absolutely the wrong thing. They're going to be a liability. Yep. They're going to freak out. They're going to, and then 80%, but the bulk are going to not do anything because they don't want to, I don't know. They're going to watch everybody else. It's just a common thing where this is common for society now. I don't know what to do. What are you doing? I don't know. It's this trepidation. Then you've got another 10% that are going to just lean in. The guys who run to the gunfire, the guy, maybe they're military already. Maybe that's just how they were born to jump. And they may still do the wrong thing, but the effort is there.
They're going.
Right.
Yeah.
The fighters. And then one is just and it's kind of shows this is not a financial bell curve either, because we say, well, there's 99% versus the 1%. It's not that. But to saying that there's one, generally out of 100, that's kind of step back and has a level of just sort of understanding, looking at the big picture. When in doubt, zoom out. Kind of a financial thing, but is that kind of sees what's going on and say, hey, all right, you all come over here, get those, grab
Take
those
charge.
people, right. And may not be the person who's got the actual title,
right? Just
somebody who just jumps in there. And especially in things when it's not a military structure, it's just, and that's what I would love to see is if we could start changing that bell curve to gather more of the 80% and of the upper, just to say of those who they just don't want to act because they really don't know. Well, then let's get you some knowledge and some skills and some confidence that you now would know what to do. So maybe we could in another, 10, 20, 100,000 years have a different demographic, but because that's saying something. Is it just human nature? I don't want to just be fatalist like that.
I got you.
I wouldn't think that we can do something more, but right now our education system doesn't do anything. Our education system's based in
has to come from here. Has to come from the individuals.
Right. So I would like to see that again, and if we can use online mixed with live training, great. That's what I'd love to see.
So when Mike called me up and said, "Man, I got this guy I want to introduce you to," he's like, "But you better book at least like 3 back-to-back podcasts. You're going to be able to talk to this guy for 6 hours because there's so much there." He wasn't wrong at all. I could literally keep sitting here and talking to you forever.
We've gone way too long, I'm sure.
No, we have not. it's been a couple hours, but for me, it's that we get to condense so much stuff into this. This is just why I feel so fortunate, so blessed to just be in the position to do it. I was saying to somebody else, I don't know how I got here. I just know I enjoy every minute of it, and I take so much away from it, and then I get to, we get to give it to other people, and in that, like, there's some wisdom here, right? There's some experience here. There's a lot of knowledge here, and there's a what's the word I'm looking for? There's a freshness here, which is may sound weird, for you or for other people to hear. In that, you kind of mentioned where you were in your 30s, where you were in your 40s, where you were in your 50s, and now where you're in your 60s. You are still pushing, right? You are still doing the thing. You are still going through that process, of that we started with that acronym, right? At SERE, in there, it's this constant thing. What do I have to do now? Where am I in this process? And so the term I would use is refreshing for me. And it also is like, it's very inspirational in a sense, because I just mentioned earlier, I'll be, I'm sort of on, and I mention this quite frequently because it's on my mind a lot, that we are in this point, like my own business in CC United's business, we're in this transition right now, and I'm recognizing where I am in life,
Sure.
Right? And where I was 10 years ago. I could not have predicted where I am now. I had a plan.
Me
right?
either. I could have never mapped out when I started the business that this is where I would be, or got to this level of success, and the road, the highs and the lows that got me to here. But also that all I know now is like, so I can't possibly map the next 5, 10, whatever that I have in me to continue to do it. But I want to do it because it's kind of, it's what I have done. It's what speaks to me. It's what I feel as a legacy. If I would,
feel proud about.
I am proud of, what if it ends now, then it's like, I'm proud of what we did and what, I had a big part in getting that school started. The one that we're at now, the Army Aviation Center, that was started in 2006. Actually, the first class was in beginning of 2007. But I know, because I had tried to do it. That's what got me in flight school, was in '86. To do that in 20 years later and finally get it established. Now, there's a lot of people involved in helping, and it helped that there were some people at the chief staff and vice chief staff of the Army at the time who came from the same community I did, who understood it. You don't have to sell SERE to them. They came from that community and understood, from going back through the history of certain organizations and having very many times on major operations, contingency operations, designed to protect American lives in time of crisis. You get people isolated. It happens, Murphy jumps in those kind of operations. And we learn and we continue to evolve, but it almost happened every time. It's because they operate at such thin margins of, that's why we trained them well. That's why we do this kind of stuff. But with that, they understood that we need to make this investment. And just as I do, that I'd like to do this as a company. Yes, if I can, this, I don't care what people can think what they will, that they think this is a cash cow. I invite them. Come on. If you think this is a cash cow, this is a passion project. It always has been, and, if we can pay the bills and all of that, it's fine. I'm fine with it. And, but whether it's the products or this stuff, it will cost what it costs. And I just think other people, in another way outside of conflict and chaos and that, is that I would love to see people enjoy what I've gotten to enjoy, because what is life for, if not to both figure out what do I have to do, again, back to the nature level, and then if I have some level of freedom, not what's told to me, well, you're this or that, or if I travel other places, well, it's different too. Could you, depending whether they say it's free or not free, do you feel more free or do you not feel more, what do you feel like? But also, what do you bring to the table? If I bring skill sets and or a level of mindset on my freedom, I could be in a non-permissive, totally clamped down or bad, chaotic situation. And if I choose that I have the skill sets that I'm going to make myself free.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
You can
I'm going
be
to
free.
escape. I'm going to evade. I'm going to, you know, I'm saying I could do that as necessary. And if I can do that in those things, why can't I do it in just life and through business and life and to be successful?
Relationships,
Right.
all of that. Yeah.
Have it all work for you. And it's not, I'm not saying it's easy and it falls at your feet, but you know, I don't know what in the military, possibly the SERE stuff because I stuck with it, but that prepared me to be successful. I don't have that in my, you know, I didn't have that. I didn't grow up with that. I don't have a business.
You didn't go to Harvard.
None of that. I did not go to college. I went to that all-male military school, you know, that it was totally not, but it did prepare me for, and so whatever that truth is, that at least worked for me. And I don't say it's a crucible that you have to, you know, all the things about, you do have to beat
it's different for different people.
It is. Yeah. There is some truth to things like better start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. Even if uncomfortable is, and this is one thing I would say, not, you know, go out here and suck it up and, you know, I mean, like all the things that we do in schools, like, you know, the Hell Week, you know, for initial parts of BUDS or SEAL training and all that kind of thing. There are those crucibles, but I'm talking more about being uncomfortable with starting over, right? As you come out, I don't care what your sergeant's major, W4, W5, you know, 04, 05, 06, whatever, is that, what's your ranks? You know,
that's what you were.
Is that, you're right. Yeah. And now you're all over again, starting over. If your ego is too much that you can't, you know, accept that, if you're comfortable with starting over, not being sure, being a beginner again,
being a white belt,
you've done right. That you could start and be okay with that.
Totally.
I think then the world's your oyster. Yeah. You're gonna, as long as you can, and because you're going to be doing that even in the job. You know, I don't have to have the title. It's not, you know. I was one guy in a garage kind of starting out, you know. Doesn't matter that it says president or whatever. That doesn't mean anything, you know. It may
president of what?
Yeah. Right. Or I could take you know, you could take yourself out into a separate, because you want to just do the design stuff and the creative side. And you could put a CEO or somebody, or if you still own the business, you know, in other words, does the title matter? You know, and it's what you can do and what you bring, and really what you build and can manifest for yourself and those around you. That it doesn't just lift me up, it lifts my family up, it lifts the community up, it lifts my employees, whatever it does to, you know, but, you know, and sometimes there's tough times, then you gotta, you know, you're the one who sucks it up. Doesn't matter that it's not, you know, I didn't bring in, you know, all this inflation. I didn't go turn the money printer on.
Fair versus unfair.
Right. But I'm the one in charge, so you're going to get blamed for that. And then there's going to be times when I made a decision based on the best information I had. And it didn't work out. Yeah. You know, it didn't work out, or it didn't, whatever. And you have to, those are going to be those uncomfortable things. I will say that a lot of those entrepreneurs, these people who want to be there's a big difference, and they won't know it. They won't believe me until they actually do it, which is if you have a small operation where you're just, you know, and I saw a huge shift just like it once I started taking on employees, because I was, you know, you start off as your own thing.
It's a whole nother ball game.
Right.
Yeah.
But they won't believe, you know, they would never believe in many cases that, I mean, I think a lot of the people who work that most business, not saying all, there are some real, you know, pieces of work out there.
I think I know where you're going with this.
But that entrepreneurs and business owners wake up in a cold sweat, not because of they're thinking about their income thing. They're worried that they made a decision, you know, or did something that could possibly force you now to go tell a family or an employee who has a family and all that they're now going to get laid off or whatever. That, to me, you know, that's the stuff. I mean, it's easier with, to some degree, you know, in the military is life and death and all these kind of things, and that, but you all know that you're in conflict. You don't, you know, everybody's in sort of some level of risk. But that's different in a way of livelihood that you could have, you know, because in a way it's a different, and you're now responsible in a different, and it is tough, just like the risk tolerance. So it goes back to risk tolerance, like I was saying but all that stuff, I would tell you, I can't say, for decades, I've watched this and been amazed, like how much the metaphors from this weird thing that we've done and I've done for all this time fits life and business and all these things. So I guess the Boy Scouts and all these things had it figured out way back when by using those kind of things as a crucible.
And isn't that interesting?
They did. They did. And it's just unfortunate that many, and maybe ours will too, will just fade into the sunset. But those things have slowly just kind of been attrited or have gotten into sort of pushed into little categories like Outward Bound kind of had been more for like at-risk youth now. Knowles more for like if you're going to make outdoor work a profession. So, as guides and things like that, that's when you do that. And the Boy Scouts, well, it's just for all the different reasons, both from political to other kinds of things. It's suddenly become, challenged from what it was not too long ago. We actually had done a program with the Boy Scouts. It was over a decade now that I did a program called the Gauntlet, and we just did a weekend with a bunch of very senior scouts. They were like what do they call the ones? We had Eagle Scouts, and then the other ones below. The other ones
Scouts.
just life. And so that's all it was for these very, very senior kids who were about to top out in age. And we brought them through
16, 17 in most cases. Yeah.
And we were down outside of Orlando and did this program for just a weekend, but we brought in SERE and did the construct of something that really challenged them, and gave them some things. And we also kind of split them out. So we did a solo thing. Now they do that with what is Order of the Arrow.
Yep, Order of the Arrow.
But but then sometimes how this like, well, okay, so I'm alone by myself and you're alone by yourself right there.
You're 30 feet away.
Yeah, exactly. Are we really alone? It's almost like if I yell, you're over here, and we did a little more room, where it wasn't
a little more room.
Yeah, and like I said, they allowed us to do it. But when the testimonials that those kids gave at the end of this, because there was a film crew that kind of there, and
cool.
And they actually recorded this thing, and it was great to see, because what I was trying to prove was, and it's exactly what these kids said, this is why I joined scouting.
Right.
In other words, this is what they wanted. They wanted this, and they said, this is the best thing I've done. Like. This, all they wanted was some rigor and some,
to do hard things.
Right. Yeah. And test themselves and learn from, and I know everybody who's involved, whether it's Boy Scouts or any kind of program like that, it ebbs and flows in localities based on, well, what's the quality of the instructors there? It's usually fathers and other kinds of things.
The volunteers that make those programs go.
And they may have some level of training or other kinds of things. Sometimes it's going to be the blind leading the blind. And so just reading the book and then just kind of trying it themselves for the first time while they're doing it with their sons. But we just did it because, and we just did it as a test, and it was hugely successful. But the reality is I couldn't just do this. I'd come all the way across country because we're in Colorado to do this in Florida after I was done a gig up in around the DC area for another client. But and it was great. But again, I couldn't just do this out of the goodness of my heart, and all that, because there's a lot of logistics in that, especially if we were on the road. But anyway, I just see that there's a craving for this. And it's not just, I think, young people, and I'm not saying just young boys. I mean, I think for the Girl Scouts, but, isn't just about selling cookies.
So it's a human thing.
Yeah, it is a human thing. And I think that these things would benefit all of them, to both empower them, give them confidence and all of that. And, they can still play. We're not telling them to be Luddites and throw their phones away, but know this stuff and know about nature, because it's going to teach you about life too.
It goes back to diversifying your skill set and, and understanding all those things. People do look for those things. I think, as an example, today's youth, jiu-jitsu is one of those, right? People are putting their kids in jiu-jitsu because they're recognizing the way sports is going. It's just not providing the same type of structure, discipline, I guess, connection to team, and the responsibilities to that have kind of gone away. So, BJJ has become huge, and it's great. Martial arts just in general, I think, is great for kids for those same reasons. But the point of that is it's, it's kind of like then it becomes like an all-in thing. Like everything I get comes out of this, right? Like I just choose just like being the one sport athlete. Like I just do baseball,
right?
And I play it year round. But you're missing so many other things, and that's a different analogy because I come from the fitness and health and wellness side of the house. But we see like that there's going to be a point of diminishing returns if that's all you're doing. And so why not go experience these things? Again, that plants the question in your head, what haven't I thought about? Right? Or what should I be thinking about? And how do I, again, it's not just survival, right? It should be moving to the next thing all the time.
Right.
Always understanding that very quickly, I could be right back to the beginning again. So,
well, and it's you say fitness because I always wonder. I assume it's in the fitness world, and it's in other places that we always say, any strength overused is a weakness.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. And the guys who you're always going to do
always
the things
gravitate to
we
this.
gravitate to the thing that we do best.
Yeah.
Whether it's vanity stuff or whether it's something that I'm built for this. As a friend, I was much more a runner. In our days, it was always about rucking and all that.
I can move heavy shit. That was my thing.
My son's built like me, and he's already crushed all 58 of the 14ers in Colorado, and he's out there. I'm just saying that, but and that's his strength. But it's just like, okay, well, now you got to do some anaerobic stuff.
Right.
Don't get
listen weights or something.
I mean, it's great to be anaerobic. But if you're going to just be a marathoner and all that, and granted, people pick. I mean, you can get to the Olympic level in obviously a very narrow niche, but that's a choice. It's a choice. But what are you giving up?
What gets pushed up the plate?
Right. And in this world, and in life for most of us, the best thing is to be as strong as you can be on a broad sense. When it's physically, mentally, spiritually, all the above.
100% agree.
Yeah. And so that's, and again, you can do that with what we're talking about. And I think there's no better classroom than, because what you witness in nature, I just going back to things that we thought were weird, and there's been a lot of talk about, levels of information.
Right.
We have misinformation and disinformation, and we even had a new one not too long ago called malinformation.
Oh, I missed that one. Nope, missed it.
Did you?
Yeah, missed that one.
It's been defined by that malinformation. Actually, this is interesting. You're probably going to go, what? Malinformation is information that's true, but makes another organization, or say maybe the government or whatever, look bad.
So the truth.
So
Let's go back. That sounds like the truth with the capital T.
Right.
Is,
but it's one of it's like, what are we doing? But with that, what I would just say is situational awareness and or a priori thinking, critical thinking. You'd said, all of the same, cut from the same cloth. I find if you see it in nature, that's going to go. That's probably as above, so below, and as I see in nature, so is in. That's what animals do in nature. But this is politics, or this is economics, or this is It's like this doesn't work. If it doesn't work here,
man.
Right? Yeah. Exactly. And I would just say, you can't sell me that this is right when I don't see it manifest elsewhere in the natural world, and it doesn't smell right for that reason.
Or worse, tell me that I'm not seeing what I'm seeing. Right. Gaslight me.
Well, exactly. Yeah. There's a lot of that. And so I think that kids could benefit because, there is a lot of talk about, and, in the world of POW type stuff, there's all different kinds of things you could kind of think, but one of them, could be even, there's exploits, you can be exploited, you could be this or that, but, they always talk about indoctrination too. Mm-hmm. I mean, back in the day, historically, if you looked at what happened, the POWs in Korean War, is where we saw it. I didn't really see it in World War II, not with the Axis, basically Germany and Japan, but in the Korean War, we had a whole new adversary that our service men and women were not ready for, where they got in these camps and now they're being indoctrinated into, at the time, the communist, sort of regime. And we saw it again in Vietnam, but
we saw it again in Afghanistan and Iraq too, with, on the other side.
Right. But all I'm saying is that, so with that, if young people aren't, how would they know that they're not prepared, or how would they know if we go to public school, and we go to these things, and it doesn't matter, public school, or you can be, People you can be, inculcated into a thinking, culture. Well, cult is in the word. Yet you can get to where you can push people to something, is a political ideology, an economic ideology, a religious ideology, a whatever that may or may not, be, what. Now you say, well, don't parents do that? Well, certainly,
Sure.
we all do that. We're products of what, but at some point, hopefully you've
gained some skills and some awareness.
Get some other, I guess. And the only other thing I can say that's the most natural is just take humans out of it as much as possible. The one thing about nature, there's two axes. We have a thing we call foresight that we built, another sort of a planning tool type thing. But there's two axes, basically. You've got two of them on the side, which is one is environment, the environmental kind of thing. So that's just everything that's nature. The other one is a temporal, is a time thing. So we're talking just basically the world we live in, 3 dimensions plus a fourth of time.
Right.
But the others is just people. There's you. Okay, there's just you in the world, because you are in your head. You're, you observe all this. But you're also there. You're hungry, you're tired, you're cold, you're whatever, or you're energized, you're ready. You're scared. Whatever. You bring all that to this equation.
Yeah, right.
But just those first 3, that's just you surviving in nature. Then you enter this fourth one. It's a big one. It's called everybody else.
Yeah.
Right. And that axis is all subjective.
Yeah.
Completely subjective.
Unpredictable.
An ounce of perception is worth a pound of performance, and all these kind of things, right? And image and ego and all these titles. And
very unpredictable.
All of that, yeah. And there's people, and it's not like, well, they're all bad. No, it's not that. There's great people there, and there's a lot of that 80% that they don't know what to do.
Yeah, it's the good. There's everything from the good to the evil
and then
axis.
There's bad actors. And and that one, I think on the other side, most psychologists will tell you, I think there's on the other side, there's actually one on that bottom 10. That 1 out of 100 is also a sociopath.
Yes.
Complete sociopath. But, just like you have your noble, wise person or whatever, your noblesse oblige, type person who's going to do the right thing for the right reasons. You've also got somebody out there who's Machiavellian, dark tetrad,
100%.
Whatever, who's going to do things that's just there to
it's evil.
All me, heck with you, and that. So, in the end, it's navigating all that. Now we kind of stay in this realm because again we're insulated. Well, we've got time, but we're insulated from the environment for the most part. It's 70 degrees dry always. We go from a 70-degree dry car to a 70-degree dry building to and so we're just unprepared for so much of these destabilizing things that and I'm telling you, I don't care if you're fully self-actualized. You're making it, maybe you were in a wealthy family, whatever, and just everything was you just got it all. And the moment that bottom rungs are your safety and security or your survival, your actual survival, life and death, are even threatened, that whole thing is a house of cards and will fall. You'll race right like that. You're no longer, you're nothing about that or caring about I'm fitting in. All that whole thing runs right to that.
And then what happens?
Well,
we saw it.
Yeah. So
yeah, we saw it. I mean,
right. You run for toilet paper.
That's you go by all the toilet paper.
Yeah. So,
all the really rational thoughts come. That's when, again, going back, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to rise right to the top when it gets bad by buying toilet paper.
Well, in some cases, there's a lot of people who live in fantasy worlds because that's all it is right now. It's just in their mind. They've really never been tested. And you could poke a lot of holes in a lot of these people. But and in the end, why not? I'm not nothing against the prepping and the preparing and all that, but prepare in a way that actually lifts you up to be better while times are good. So there's always time if the wheels come off, if all the different ways that there's something's going to happen. We're going to be invaded by something, coronal mass injection, all the all the things that we talk about, EMP. It's okay. Those are all horrific and can have varying degrees depending on your proximity to it. So pretty bad impact.
Catastrophic stuff.
Right. But you also might lose that castle thing that you had, I mean,
Then
both completely destroyed, or at least the contents were, and it's unusable. So why not have something that you can take with you? You could pick up and move whatever. A lot of people throughout time, if stuff got really bad, you know what they were able to do? They were able to pick up and move.
That's America, man.
And there's unfortunately there was a lot of people in 1930s Germany who some chose to stay and thinking that it couldn't be this bad. It can't be this bad, right? It can't be.
Or they're just straight up like this isn't happening.
Right. And
total denial.
Right, denial. And then it was too late. Right? They were out of options. And all I can say is that they, throughout history, that when things have gone wrong in places, those who are able and willing to just accept what they're seeing and go, you know what, my risk tolerance here, if we're going to have a line in the sand, you don't just keep, well, I'll move it again, or you just don't have any line. You say, well, I'll leave when it's bad enough, or what's bad enough, right? When the fire's coming racing down the mountain, okay,
now
I'm not hot yet.
Now you don't have a choice.
It's racing, at speeds that you can't even run that fast. So you better make a decision or you're going to get cooked. And in this case,
And where do you go?
Well,
that goes back to your 4 words.
Yeah.
Keep your options open.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I mean, people out of, 1940s China, before, I think there was supposedly a saying there saying, hey, have a fast, basically have some gold and a fast boat down by the dock.
Be ready to get out.
Exactly. And that's a macro kind of thing. And I'm not dooming and glooming anything, on our country, but I would just say whatever happened, it is history. It happens. And I'm sure, the British Empire pre-World War II, is not the Britain of today.
Right.
Oh, it's still a world power, but it's not the British Empire that the sun never set on around the world.
Right.
So things change. There's lots of people out there who is, I forgot his name, the one of the major billionaire hedge funds. It's going to escape me here for the moment, but he's written books about the cycles of all that.
Okay.
It's the cycles of all the empires that we've seen since the Roman Empire and all that, the rise and fall of empires. We've enjoyed our time in the sun for quite some time. Do we think that's that all these other cycles and that somehow
it just stopped?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's so whatever time frame. It's that kind of stuff will be probably not in my lifetime. I don't see that happening in the next 20 years or something, unless it's again,
who knows,
major asteroid or something.
Who knows?
Oumuamua is going to come from whatever.
Right.
But I don't think any. But but our offspring might, or our grandchildren might. And wouldn't it be better if we could give them a skill sets and a way of thinking that they can look? You are empowered to do this. You are, in case when it's life, death, or life and death, or life, limb, eyesight, you get a level of full sovereignty, as if you don't already have it, but you have a level of full sovereignty to do whatever to save your life. It's just kind of an a priori thing, right? And not to take others, but I'm saying that people, if you were defending yourself and somebody who's trying to take your life, whatever, then you kind of get, just kind of natural law, not just courts of law to say what you can do. And I'm not getting into a CCA
right.
sort of argument, but that also means you've been doing it, not at the last thing, right before they're about, that you're within seconds of your life ending.
Right.
That you could also initiate that earlier if necessary, whatever that means. Whether I'm traveling in a foreign country and need to get out because it's destabilized, I need to, punch. There was an American in Yemen who, speaking of, when a conflict kicked off, which was the Yemen, war. I mean, they basically just kicked off into war. We pulled the embassy out. It was like that. Mm-hmm. It wasn't, the news prior had been about, we were saying that we're going to be, everything's good. It's all good. Great partner here with the global war on terror and all that stuff. And all of a sudden, boom, it's like the embassy's pulling out. And it was like, and they had been saying, well, Americans should kind of get out of here. But, did you say it? Did you not really say it? But the bottom line is when it kicked off and once we pulled the embassy, there's really nothing at that time that came to Yemen. I mean, some other countries came in with ships and some airplanes. We just chose, and there are times, probably, I can't answer as to why. Sometimes we do stuff to help get everybody out, and sometimes we say we can't. We weren't able to. Can't, won't, hard to say.
Right.
I'm not going to Monday morning quarterback. I don't know, but I will say, when you're in that situation and there is nothing obvious to say, go over here, here's where all the Canadians go this way, Indians go here, Americans go here. If that's not happening, well, then you, again, take the initiative. This guy, he was a business owner. He was there in Yemen. He was Yemeni and American, American, but he's an American citizen. He'd been doing some business stuff there. I think he was trying to get teas and some other stuff that he would import and all this. So he'd been there for a while, speaks the language, he's aware. But it kicked off faster than he was expecting. He ran down to the port level, had some money, found himself somebody with a friggin' John boat with a outboard engine, and said, I want you to point this thing west,
and just
took it across the Red Sea and hit the coast of Djibouti.
Wow.
And this little, he's got a selfie. He took a selfie of himself doing it.
Wow.
That's very, millennial or Gen Z.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it's totally, you just basically invaded a country. You're going to get, and exactly as soon as they hit the coast, now the guy operating the boat that he was in is Yemeni, not a Yemeni American. Well, he had his passport, so the police on the coast just grabbed him here and say, what's, what is this? And he goes, I'm an American, there's a war over there. There's missiles exploding. And he said, so I want to see the embassy. Well, they arrested him. They arrested the other guy, but he said, no, he helped me, just you can send him back. Anyway, he spent about 3 or 4 days in the jail. But then after that, it was like, it was all fine. He processed through. So in other words, he feared for his life. He got out.
Yep.
Here's a guy who just did a international and across the Red Sea, type of evasion on his own initiative. Now he was successful. There's probably still Americans there. Now maybe they choose to be there. Maybe they're just scared to leave. Mm-hmm. But that's happened other places, and it goes back to there's been POW places where. Okay, there was plenty who didn't try, just didn't want to. Maybe they were physically unable. They were, too sick,
for whatever reason.
Right. Yeah. We're not saying that they all had the ability, but maybe some did, and like, I don't want to risk it.
Right.
And then others who did. Well, it's like life in many ways, because there's no reason why. In some cases, that the guys, if they'd gone, they could have gone too, and maybe have succeeded. Just like here with.
Here business, we are. Business, life, exactly. Relationships, all of those things.
So many more I think, you say, there's not some fixed amount of you've got it, so I can't have it because you've got it all.
It's plenty of pie, man.
Sure is. All right.
I think the so many takeaways here. I'll walk away from this conversation and be processing this for a while. A lot of the things that you're saying, how they relate to so many of the things that, I've come across in life and in my own journey, particularly even just this week, some conversations that I've had, I think some of those have been like conversations around triumph. Some of them have become, around conversations of failure with folks, and the challenges that they face. And at the end of the day, it's complex, but it's not complicated what you're talking about. And I think most people can get their head around it if they just stop moving for a second, maybe clean the windshield off a little bit. Sure. And I have a little bit more clarity to this now. For people that want to explore what you're talking about, and they want to explore SoCo and the types of things that you offer. You mentioned, we talked a little bit about you're kind of, you're attempting to make this more accessible to more people.
Right.
How do they find out more about that? Where do they go? What should they expect?
Well, that's why we're a little premature.
We're a little behind at the moment. That's fine. That's part of the journey, right?
Yeah, it's. Well, I'm just saying that because we're still building the stuff right now. Mm-hmm. So I got the opportunity, and I enjoyed being able to, and I appreciate the invitation because it forces me to address. And sort of unpack how we want to make this relevant. Because I do see that it is, but how can I more clearly make it relevant to people out there, and whether that's in the sense that they feel uneasy and there's some anxiousness about institutions and all that. And what do I do to kind of cover myself, like we were talking about, from financial institutions? And that's pretty broad. I mean, we're talking, again, all of life. And so it's like, okay, well, there's lots of maybe methodologies, but here's kind of, we do try to give a framework for people to work through that. And then, because they're going to be strong in some areas, weak in others, and right? So do their own self-assessment. But then there's those who might at a higher level, because I really do think we're not just talking about the typical survival field craft things.
Right.
There is that. There is that.
That's an element of that.
But what I believe that I think over all this time of what I've sort of figured out, and I've lived it myself, is to say there's a higher level here. To come in at a higher level and the philosophy of this, but like I said, it's applied, like applied freedom, applied physics, and applied philosophy that will work for you as it has worked for me, because I just, there's nothing that tells me that I should have been successful other than I use the same things that I would use to be successful at just living in a natural environment, as, again, Thoreau's, that kind of stuff, to go out and live deliberately and know that he could do it and know that that's what living is. And I got to do that for a while. I did that course right out of the gate. I've done it several times afterwards. But I would just say, and then I've done it in business. And so with that, I can hopefully give people a framework that not only takes away that anxiousness, but maybe even then elevates them to something else, not just removal, and give them peace of mind and less of anxiousness, but actually maybe get more to that fulfillment side. I would love to see that. But I've got to, as we're doing it, we're building this thing anyway. And so if they go to Sokoa, they're not going to even see anything right now. They'll see it. There's a site there. You can go back and look at the old one if you want to go back in the Wayback Machine.
Right.
You can see Sokoa, but that's just our shingle back when we were just defense contractor, government contractor.
So it's not relevant.
And it's very specific to SERE, personal recovery kind of stuff. And that certainly we still in that domain. However, this is now
a bigger project,
a bigger passion project now, as this transition, and I think could be more relevant to a larger audience, and especially given the next 3, 5, or whatever years we got ahead of us before we come out the other side.
I mean, I'm excited to watch it come together. I mean, and here's the other cool part about this conversation. I was saying this earlier about, like, I could sit here and we could keep going till tomorrow if you'd let me, but is that, as this thing evolves and as it comes together, we can maybe revisit this as you figuring it out and continue to tell that story about how you're using all of this and where it's gotten you with that business model.
Absolutely.
Because I'm fully on board with the lessons and the principles that are involved here. And you mentioned a lot of things that were important to me as a kid too. Like, I went through the Boy Scouts. I did that. There were men around me that were, children of the 60s, right, in the 70s, that grew up differently. They were in wars. They were, they served in the military. They played sports.
Right.
They had jobs. They worked for companies. They started companies and all those things. And those are the people that we were out experiencing nature with, and doing things. And, like, some of it was playing, and some of it was doing harder things. I mean, like, whether it was a backpack trip as a 10-year-old out, and we were out on the trail I wasn't alone. I was with maybe 5 or 6 other, kids, and maybe a young adult, but we had to learn lessons. We had to learn to work together. We were cold. We were wet. Sure. We were hungry. It wasn't SERE school, but at 10 years old, it was something.
Impactful.
Exactly.
Impactful.
And
yes.
So, I mean, and then with that, it was like the experiences you got around that. It's like, well, if I could do this, what else can I do? And instead of dipping my toes in the water of things, I felt more confident to do stuff. So I guess what I'm saying is this my own life experience, and even this, like, just entering into this journey, like, who am I? Like, I'm just coming into this thing to learn something new, and it's turned into something much, much different. And I'm not looking for the end state. I have no earthly idea what that looks like right now. I care, but that's not what I'm focused on right now. I'm just focused on gathering more information to understand how to make better decisions about where maybe the show goes, but also that all the things that we're talking about today, just in terms of business, but in my life and in relationships, how the things that I do with my kids, what do I pass down to them, all that stuff. So I would love to come back and revisit where this is at some point in time and see how you're doing and somehow be able to support it.
Well, I would appreciate the invitation and would love to share, because I would say, but you just already had alluded to, which is it's always about the journey, not the destination.
100%.
You know, so I don't have a destination either. I got no end point here other than enjoying life but hopefully on a trajectory that I think is always improving.
Right.
Not only just my own desire to, because that's the one thing. Yeah. At some point, my physicality is, I'm getting older. It starts to exactly. But you know what? The one thing is the mind. For as long as it can, we can keep
it sharp.
Keep it sharp and keep increasing that as long as we can. And then again, helping those around us. So, but yeah, happy to share that journey. And it's been a blast. Thank you so much, Scott.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you so much, Bart.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely.